For years and years, wrestling fans from all over the world dreamed and fantasized what would happen if the WWF took on WCW. Then years later, we finally got it. We finally got the invasion, the WWF versus WCW. Many consider it to be the biggest flop in wrestling history. What should have been the biggest and greatest storyline in wrestling history was a massive flop. But today, we ask the question, was it really that bad? Of course, I'm talking about the WWF Invasion from 2001. But before I go any further, allow me to introduce myself. I am the one true villain, Marty Skell, pro wrestling veteran, globe trotter, but most importantly, a massive wrestling fan, returning to AAA on September 30th. Joining me today, he is my co-host. He is the producer of the show. He is so jaded, so bitter, so sick of professional wrestling. I'm forcing him against his will to watch it with me, Mr. Samuel Scott. Sorry, Sam, that was a bit of a burial. Today, I'm starting with the burying from the get-go.
All right, well, no worries. Is that a spoiler for your review of the show? Maybe we'll find out. I'm actually glad you started with that because I don't know what the temperature is of the fans of this pay-per-view. And last week we got an absolute reaming, didn't we, for our views on ECW? But without spoiling much, I'm going to say maybe my review of this is going to be more in line with the popular vote. Perhaps we will find out.
Well, it's funny because this week I put out there that we gave Heatwave 98 2 stars out of 5, and the fans weren't too happy.
They were not happy.
Strongly disagreed with us both. We both gave it 2 out of 5 stars, so I'm not just the guilty one. I challenged the fans that disagreed with us to actually go back and watch the show.
Yeah.
Because I'm convinced that the majority would watch that back and be like, you know what? It doesn't hold up so well. I feel like there are many things in wrestling that don't hold up as well, that you just look back with rose-tinted glasses, including, I'll say it, the Attitude Era. I think we look back at the Attitude Era thinking that's the greatest time in wrestling history. You go back and watch it, and there's a lot of like, oh, this doesn't age too well. I kind of feel like ECW is very similar to that, in my personal, humble opinion. So if we offended anyone with our Heatwave 1998 review, which you can listen to, by the way, go listen to last week's episode if you haven't already. I do apologize. But this is an honest podcast. We're not just going to come on here with our opinions aren't exactly the social norm, should I say. We're going to give our opinions. Like I said in my introduction, I'm a pro wrestling veteran. I've been around for a little while now. I feel like I'm entitled to my opinion. Sam, he's less entitled to his opinion, but he's still a human being. So listen to him, okay?
Mate, I went back. So a lot of people in the feedback were saying the Mike Awesome Tanaka match. They were like, guys, did you not watch that? Are you insane? So I actually went back and watched that one, and I still stick by with what we said, honestly. Unlike you, I'm not sorry if we've offended anyone with our review at all. These ECW pay-per-views just aren't precious to me. I don't have any sentimental attachment to them. I just watched it for the first time. I'm pretty happy. I think a 2 out of 5. And don't forget, that's just below average of what could possibly be with 5-star. And I don't give out 5 stars willy-nilly. So really, if you think a 2-star from me is probably a 3-star from somebody else. So I wouldn't really be too mad on that. And I still enjoyed a lot of aspects of it. And it certainly hasn't put me off ECW. In fact, we've got some feedback. People have been saying we should actually check out Anarchy Rules 99, I think it was. So I'm looking forward, maybe in the future we'll cover that one. If they weren't saying Heatwave 98 was the best thing, they're saying try Anarchy Rules 99. I'm willing to give it a go for sure.
Well,
it's got our boy Tajiri on it, allegedly, who we get to see in this episode. So.
Well, it's funny watching that Mike Awesome versus Masato Tanaka match.
Mm.
it got me thinking, I'd like to see Mike Awesome without all the tables, without all
Mhm.
the head drops, and
Mhm.
without all the dangerous power bombs. And funny enough, we actually get to see that today on the WWF Invasion episode that we're about to
Straight up
review
first match.
and
Yeah.
get into. Just going into a little bit of housekeeping. Yes, I guess that we've touched upon it already. People weren't too happy with our 2-star rating for last week's episode. I also found a tweet from Lance Storm regarding the powerbomb off the top rope that he took, which
Oh,
I'm
yeah.
going to attempt to find now. Basically, surprisingly, he said that, okay, I'm going to read it right now. He says, how I didn't get knocked out on this, I'll never know. So he didn't get knocked out. He said, this hurt like hell on the landing, but I felt fine a minute later. I had no concussion symptoms or after effects, but I assume I had to have gotten one here.
Mm.
So that's pretty shocking. I don't know if people don't know what I'm talking about. On last week's show, it's Lance Storm versus Chris Candido, and Chris Candido gives Lance Storm a super powerbomb from the top rope, and Lance's head just rocks on the mat so hard like a basketball. And I actually put a reel up on our Instagram with a bit of slow motion of his head hitting, because at first we actually said on the pod last week, I was like, well, maybe his head didn't even hit the mat, maybe he just rocked. So I slowed it down. It's like, oh, he definitely hit the
rocked.
mat. it definitely
Yeah.
it bounced off the mat. So, but he was saying that he thinks he was okay, which is remarkable. So that was from last week. Last week, I should have brought this up. I forget to update you fans often what I'm doing because we're just so talking about the episode. But last week, I had just come off of a week tour of Canada. I was up in like the Winnipeg area. I've never really been there before, so that was really fun. I was there for a good week with Primoz Wrestling and got to hit all these towns in Canada. So that was a lot of fun. And then this past weekend just gone, I made my debut at UCP in Florida, Orlando, Florida. So that's pretty exciting. They're running shows in Old Town Kissimmee, and I debuted by running in and challenging the champion. So made my intentions known for the UCP championship. So if you live in the Florida area, I get this a lot. People asking me from different places, when are you going to come wrestle here? When are you going to come wrestle here? Well, I'm wrestling in Florida now, and I think their next show is October 21st. So just keep an eye on my Instagram. I put all my dates on there. And then we're recording this now on a Friday. You'll be listening to this on a Monday if you listen to it right away. This weekend, I have some autograph signings. One on the 19th at the Wrestling Universe in Queens. Super cool wrestling shop. So I'm sure I'll be nerding out there over the wrestling merchandise. Not that I don't have enough already. And then on Sunday, I'm doing Wrestle Bash #2 in New Jersey, a big wrestling convention. Did it last year, had a lot of fun. This year, there's a lot of big stars. I think Rob Van Dam, star of the show, is there. DDP, another star of our show, is there. So I think Sabu might be there. I'm trying to find the poster.
Star of Huntington.
Yes, Star of Huntington. There's a whole bunch of big stars there. So I'm looking forward to that. And maybe I can go speak to these guys. If we had any questions that went unanswered on our podcast, much like what happened to Namira in Survivor Series 2002 with Victoria and Trish Stratus, maybe I can go ask them. So yeah, so hopefully these would have already happened if you listen to this now, but if you got to see me at the weekend and said hi again. Hi, Back to the Future, I guess. But no, actually also yesterday I went to the shopping mall to pick up some new sneakers. I'm not one of these guys that has a whole room full of sneakers, but I do enjoy them. But of course, I am the villain. I need to look suave wherever I go, obviously. So I picked up some new sneakers. They weren't cheap, maybe $170. I don't know how sneakers became so expensive now. But anyway, in one of these sneakers shops, they had a bunch of licensed wrestling merchandise, like t-shirts and shorts. And I just thought it was really interesting because they had a whole line of shorts and a whole line of t-shirts. And they had Stone Cold Steve Austin, The Rock, Bret Hart, Hogan, and then I think like a generic, it might have said WrestleMania on the back, but like a host of wrestlers all on one shirts, you know, your Ultimate Warriors, your Macho Mans, everything else. And I just thought that was really interesting how when wrestling hits the mainstream and gets into stores or malls, whatever, it always seems to be the retro stuff. It was like no one
Yeah, oh,
current.
yeah.
Isn't that interesting? Like there's definitely a massive audience for nostalgia. It feels like more so than the current product almost. So I think we're doing the right thing here.
We're in a good
by
place. Yes.
Covering the
Yeah.
old wrestling shows. But yeah, nothing new, all just old. I picked up some Stone Cold Steve Austin shorts. They're really cool. And they were discounted as well. They were half price. So $20 pair of Stone Cold Steve Austin shorts. I was very happy with that. So all you guys might be seeing me running around in some Steve Austin camo shorts sometime soon. But yeah,
Did you get a picture of the merch? Not the one that you bought, the whole lot, because I've seen something similar and I've got a picture, and I'd be interested to see if they're not the same. They're actually a different set. That'd be really fascinating. Like, how far does this even go? This kind of modern retro merchandise.
You see it sometimes in places like Walmart or Target. You'll find wrestling stuff.
Okay.
Normally, the problem is, I think like a lot of these stores gave up on it because they would release wrestling shirts, and obviously, if they're in Walmart or Target, they're normally considerably cheaper than they would be, let's say, from WWE. But normally, they put them on the shelves, and the second they're on the shelves, they're gone because resellers buy them. Anything wrestling, they just buy and then resell. So
Of
yeah,
course.
but it's always the classic stuff. So always seems to be the case. But yeah, I guess we should probably get into the show. I haven't asked you how you're doing yet, Sam, but
Oh, don't worry about that. If it's just, I don't want to be an afterthought. Let's just crack on. I will say though, if you do see Lisa Marie, we've got to find out about that mirror.
I'll ask her. I will. I don't know if she's at this autograph signings, but next time I see her, I'm sure I will at some point. I shall ask her. Just before we get into Invasion, I've got some big news. Been dropping little hints for quite a few weeks now, but I can finally say the jerseys are here and the jerseys are back. Yes, you've been asking me for years now to bring back the jerseys, and finally I have them in my possession. So, on September 1st at 6 p.m., only 50, limited to 50 villain jerseys, updated villain jerseys will be available. 6 p.m., did I mention that? They'll be available on my online store, martyscale.bigcartel.com. So, like I said, there's only 50 of them. Obviously, they're in sizes as well. So, really, if you're a medium or a large, whatever it is, there's only limited amounts. These are going to sell out probably within the first day, maybe within the first hour. So, I'm just trying to give you guys all the heads up now. Get yourself a villain jersey. I get told every single day of my life, Marty, we want to see you on TV or AEW, whatever it is. It's all very well telling me that, but if you really want to support me, you got to support my colors. You got to support my swag. And what better way to stand out than wearing the villain jersey? So September 1st, put it in your calendars, pick yourself up a villain jersey. And they just look freaking cool. They're so cool. I've always prided myself on having some of the best merchandise in professional wrestling, if not the best. And these jerseys are just, French kiss. Just incredible. So, yeah, pick yourself up a jersey on September 1st. I'm so excited. They took a little while to get here, but I finally have them now. So, please don't miss out, because I know what's going to happen. People are going to miss out. And then months later, when you bringing the jerseys back? When you bringing the jerseys back? Truth is, this might be the last run of the jerseys. Probably is going to be the last run of the jerseys, because I've done them multiple times before. If you missed out at by this point, I'm sorry, that's it, because I can't keep doing all this. I just can't. I've got a podcast to run. So yeah, mark it in your calendars. September 1st. Boom. People get paid at the end of the month, so it should work out nicely for people.
There we go.
Absolutely.
We go.
So.
Oh, man. Like, the phrase is chef's kiss. You said French kiss, which I think should be our catchphrase.
Oh, no. Did I say French kiss?
I could not stop. I was trying to hold it in for your bit. I was trying my hardest, man.
Oh no, do we need to do that again?
No, I think it's fantastic. I think it should be our new catchphrase. Where every time we like a match, French kiss.
Okay, let's do it. So let's see if WWF Invasion was a mwah, French kiss. The date, July 22nd, 2001. The city, Cleveland, Ohio, at the Gund Arena. The attendance, 17,876 people. The buy rate, what could this buy rate be? Sam, I'm going to put it to you. What do you think pay-per-view buys for WWF Invasion?
I'm thinking that people wanted this like really badly. So I reckon it's going to be surprisingly high for not one of the big five, big four, whatever they were. I reckon this is going to be surprisingly high numbers. What though? I'm not sure. 450, 5? I reckon this is a big one. Let's hear it.
Well, you are correct on it being a big one. The buy rate was 775,000
Oh my God.
people bought this pay-per-view, which I think actually is the highest
That's
grossing
huge.
pay-per-view of WWE, WWF of all time that's not a WrestleMania. I want to say
Wow.
I was trying to do my research, and I'm pretty sure it's the 15th like most bought pay-per-view in WWF history, and
And that includes the WrestleManias and stuff.
all other 14 are WrestleManias, and
That's
then
insane.
and then number 15 is Invasion. So, like I
This-
said, people have been waiting for years and years to
Big
see
time,
WWF
yeah.
versus WCW.
Did it disappoint? We'll find out. But quickly first, I think this SummerSlam we just had was like numbers wise quite a banger as well, right?
I assume so, but it's obviously all done by different metrics, right? Because now
Nowadays, yes. Yeah.
there's not really so much pay-per-view. I don't even think this one was on pay-per-view because of the Jake Paul fight that was going on the same time. So I don't even know if you could purchase this on pay-per-view. I'm sure lots of people watched it on SummerSlam. I know the Collision, the AEW Collision episode that was on the same night going against SummerSlam really, really got hurt by SummerSlam. Their numbers were down like 40% or something because obviously everyone was watching SummerSlam. So it's very hard to kind of gauge it now because everything's so different with the streaming and Peacock and everything else. So, but yeah, I'm sure this SummerSlam was huge business. WWE's just doing crazy business, but
killing it still, yeah.
going back to their business in 2001. So I don't really want to get into the whole backstory of WCW and the WWF because we would be here all day, and I think everyone now by now knows kind of what happened. But basically, the WWF purchased WCW back in 2001 for a silly low amount. I think the final figure was 4 million or something ridiculous, which sounds yes. So basically, WCW was going out of business. Eric Bischoff he'd found some funding to buy the company. He was going to purchase it and he'd written an agreement to purchase the company. But then I guess they pulled the TV deal. So there was no TV deal with the purchase of WCW. So essentially the product
Ultimately,
was worthless, really. It's just, what are you buying then? Like other than initials, taking on contracts and, you know, a few assets, like a few rings and stuff. So Bischoff did, and basically Vince swiped in there and bought it. Bearing in mind, I want to say in the year 2000, WCW had lost, I think it was $60 million or something, or maybe more. It was, yeah, it was not doing good business. So basically that had all happened. At the same time, ECW had also gone bankrupt. And I want to say, because Vince had helped fund ECW at numerous times during its run, I think he had like first dibs on purchasing ECW. So he got that as well. So after purchasing WCW, we saw that famous episode where Vince is going to announce that he's purchased WCW and they're doing like a simulcast with WCW Nitro. And this is in the lead up to WrestleMania 17, where Vince is going to wrestle his son Shane, and they've got Nitro on at the same time as Raw. Vince is about to announce that he's purchased WCW, and Shane McMahon comes out and says, "Oh, the contract does say McMahon." but it says Shane McMahon, and Shane McMahon has purchased WCW. So, the original idea when WWF purchased WCW was to actually keep WCW as its own entity and company. They wanted to sell WCW to the TV networks and keep it running, have a completely separate roster, and actually do the whole full thing, separate creative team, separate marketing team, separate everything, and basically run WCW. And I think personally,
I would have preferred that.
well, that would have made sense. Like if, like, I'm sure if Coca-Cola bought Pepsi, they're still gonna sell Pepsi.
There's still gonna
right?
be Pepsi drinkers going.
Right.
They're not
Like,
just gonna convert to Coke.
right.
They still want
like,
their Pepsi.
It's still a $1 million company.
Mhm.
Do you know what I'm saying?
Mhm.
So it makes sense to, if you buy the company, to keep running it. So that was the idea. Then when they were trying to sell the WCW programming, it seemed like no one was really interested. Maybe that was because of WCW's reputation in its later years, or maybe they thought it was too much wrestling on TV. It's also the sort of similar time that the XFL had failed, so maybe there was some faith lost in Vince McMahon. So then Vince's next idea was that he was actually, this is actually pretty remarkable. They were going to turn the Monday night TV slot into WCW, whether that was WCW Nitro or whatever, and WWF was going to have SmackDown.
Yeah.
And
that was Thursdays, right?
Yes.
Yeah.
Or recorded them. Yeah, I think you're right. I think it might have changed a few times over the years.
Oh.
Maybe it was Thursdays, yes. Now it's Fridays, I want to say. And the original storyline to get into that was Vince was going to be caught cheating with Tori Wilson by Linda, and Linda was going to ask for a divorce, and obviously then they're dividing assets, and basically in the assets she would take
she
Monday
gets
nights.
WCW.
Well, no, she gets Monday nights and he gets Thursday nights, and then to begrudge him, she would give her Monday night slot to Shane, who had purchased WCW underneath his dad's nose. So that was the idea, and they were going to have two separate rosters. And this is basically the early signs of the brand split that we've had now for nearly 20 years.
Yeah.
So that was the original idea. But basically, I guess Viacom or whatever the TV network was, they were paying for Monday Night Raw on that Monday night slot. So they didn't want WCW. They didn't want it at all. So anyway, fast forward, Vince then basically tries out to do a WCW match on Monday Night Raw, where they promoted the last 20 minutes of Raw. Oh, it's going to be WCW, and we're going to have a match. And basically, the match was Booker T, the WCW World Champion, versus Buff Bagwell. And they put all the logos up on the building. They had a WCW referee, WCW announcer team, WCW ring announcer. It's supposed to be WCW. And basically, the match, Vince thought it was terrible. And the fans booed the match the whole time, and some of them were chanting boring and everything else. And basically, they pinpoint that to when Vince McMahon said, okay, we're giving up on making WCW a separate band. There's no audience for WCW anymore. And actually, if you go back and watch, I think it's really quite unfair, because they'd been promoting WCW as the heels, and then they did this match with Booker T and Buff Bagwell in a WWF Pro crowd, and like I said, they've been booked as the heels or presented as the heels, and of course when it's like now it's a WCW,
and then using the amount of booze as a metric for why it's bad.
Right. So I thought it was a little unfair, but basically after that, Vince decided, okay, there's no audience for WCW in terms of having its own show. We're just going to make it a storyline and have this invasion angle. So, but here's the problem with the invasion angle. Basically, WCW was owned by AOL Time Warner, and the majority of big time stars in WCW, their contracts weren't with WCW, their contracts were with AOL Time Warner. And a lot of them, when WCW finished, still had a lot of time left on their contracts, if not years. And so basically the situation was Vince could either buy their contracts out, or maybe not buy them out, but could essentially keep their contracts going. So let's say if Goldberg is getting paid $1 million a year, Vince could be like, okay, I'll honor that contract. But then obviously Goldberg would have to work for him.
Yeah.
But basically, sorry, Vince obviously wasn't prepared to spend this big amounts of money on the wrestlers. Like, he didn't think they were worth how much they were getting paid.
Yeah.
And it kind of seems crazy because you think, dude, if you would have just spent that money, you could have made so much more money. But at the same time, if all these WCW guys are coming in and they're getting paid all this amounts of money, then he's going to have to pay everyone on his roster more money as well. So that was difficult because we're talking guys like Goldberg, Kevin Nash, Scott Hall,
Sting.
Hogan, Sting, Steiner, all these guys that had these big contracts. So basically, the guys, they could choose to either sit at home and get paid, or they scrap their contracts. They can sign a new deal with the WWF, which would be for less money, and they have to work.
Mm-hmm.
So pretty much everyone decided to sit at home and get paid, and I can't blame them. Other than two guys,
Booker T.
Booker T and DDP. And I think DDP, he was around 45 when this happened. So he probably thought, if I'm ever going to have a run with the WWF,
that was the time.
It needs to be now. So he did it. He later said that he regretted it because his WWF run wasn't too clever, which I guess we'll get into in this show. Booker T, he decided to take the deal as well. And I'm guessing with him, it was a case of he saw it as an opportunity because in WCW, he'd been there for years. He hadn't started breaking out as a main eventer to the final years. And I'm sure it was always a goal of his to get to the WWF. And I think he probably just saw this as a great opportunity and he betted on himself. Because of course he could have gone tits up, much like it went for DDP. But with Booker T, he obviously had faith in his own talents and it ended up working out very well.
He did have a career with WWF.
A great career. He had a better career in WWF than he did in WCW, really.
Mm-hmm.
So it worked out for him. But this is always what it comes back to with the Invasion. When people say it didn't work, it's because it didn't have the star power and everything else. And obviously now we know why. And I'll get into some more of that stuff as we go on. So the Bagwell and Booker T match happened on July 2nd. That didn't work out. So they're like, okay, we're going to do this angle. Then Vince realizes that they don't have enough star power on the WCW side. And they really didn't, because other than Booker T and DDP, the rest of the talents that did come, the ones that were under WCW contracts, were all kind of like power plant guys. So a lot of mid-carders and guys, a lot of the guys had only been there for a few years. So we're talking guys like, there was like all the natural born thrillers, so like Sean O'Hare, Mark Jindrak, Chuck Palumbo, Mike Sanders, these guys. Then there was Shane Helms, Chavo Guerrero, Bill DeMott, I'm trying to think off the top of my head, Sean Stasiak, Lance Storm, Mike Awesome. But as great as some of these talents might have been, they're not Sting, Goldberg, Hall, Nash. No. July 9th, a week after the Bagwell Booker T match, Vince McMahon decides that there's not enough star power to the WCW side. They need to add some more wrestlers or add some more star power. Of course, he just bought ECW, and there's Paul Heyman, who is working for Vince now as a commentator, pushing hard for ECW. So what do? They decide to try and add ECW to the mix. So they have a tag team match on Raw. It's Jericho and Kane representing the WWF. It's already getting confusing. And then Mike Awesome and Lance Storm representing WCW. And in the match, Rob Van Dam and Tommy Dreamer, who don't work for the company, this is their debut, run in and they beat up Jericho and Kane with Mike Awesome and Lance Storm. Then a bunch of WWF wrestlers run out for the save. 6 of them. The Dudley Boys, Rhino, Raven, who else was it? Taz. Is that everyone? Maybe just Incredible? They run out, look like they're going to save Jericho and Kane, but then they all turn around with Lance Storm, Mike Awesome, Tommy Dreamer, and Rob Van Dam and start beating up Jericho and Kane. Paul Heyman comes up from the announcers table and announces this invasion has just got extreme. We're throwing ECW's name into the hat. ECW has now joined this invasion. We're like, okay, what the hell's going on? At the time, I was actually pretty excited for this because I was a big ECW mark.
Yeah.
Anyway, so later in the show, Vince McMahon and Shane McMahon, who have been feuding with this WWF versus WCW angle, they come together and say, oh, we need to put a stop to ECW right away. Tonight, we're going to make a 10-man tag. The 10 ECW guys against 5 WWF guys and 5 WCW guys. It's like, okay, a big 20-man tag, I guess. The tag match starts, and whatever happens, WCW and ECW guys all end up beating up the WWF guys, and they announce that they're an alliance together. And then Paul Heyman gets on the microphone and announces the new owner of ECW is Stephanie McMahon. So basically, the start of this whole thing, this whole invasion angle, or this whole WWF versus WCW program that people had dreamed of for absolute years, is basically just a backdrop for the McMahon family drama feud. Pretty crazy. And I think when they announced that Stephanie was the owner of ECW, you just had a big sigh out of the audience. I just don't understand why you got Paul Heyman, who was the legit owner of ECW, and everyone knows that. One of the greatest talkers of all time.
Mm-hmm.
Why would you not just have Paul Heyman as the owner of ECW? This was one of the, they made so many mistakes in this whole invasion thing, and we could talk about it for weeks and weeks and everything else for years, but I just don't understand the idea of Stephanie being the leader of ECW.
Yeah.
It's just completely insane. But that basically all set up this WWF Invasion pay-per-view where, you know, obviously the WCW and ECW guys going to take on the WWF guys. And what's so funny about it is even the poster. Have you seen the poster for Invasion?
Yeah, with Shane, with the morph Shane and Vince, their faces.
Really screams WCW versus WWF.
Of course.
Just Vince and Shane McMahon's face on the poster. Very bizarre.
Yeah, I mean, let's not discredit Stephanie as like a character, but
No,
you're right.
great character.
We've seen the McMahon family drama all the time, constantly, and you've just missed an opportunity to have something actually fresh, actually unique, with somebody who blows her out the water and grasps a character as well on screen. As great as she is, it's like a bad guy. She's like Paul.
Why?
It was just such a missed opportunity, which to me is the kind of running theme of this whole invasion thing, is what a missed opportunity.
I mean, I understand that they couldn't get their hands on the big talents, and I guess I'll get into it, but like, I just don't understand why they didn't wait to get these talents. Like, they didn't have to do it straight away. I don't understand why they did that. I do have a theory that because Triple H got injured right before this, and I wondered if they decided to push this invasion angle prematurely because Triple H was out and maybe it messed up storylines. There's also another theory that maybe Vince was kind of desperate to sell this WCW product, maybe make some money back. I don't know. But figured having them on the TV would be able to, you know, help them be able to sell WCW as its own entity. But they just did not whatsoever have the star power. And what's so just frustrating about the whole thing, so many guys legit within the next 18 months, pretty much everyone other than Sting joined WWF. Like when they finally finished the invasion angle at Survivor Series, the very next night, Ric Flair, like Mr. WCW debuts. And then not long after this, end up like 3 months after that, NWO debut. Not long after all of that, Eric Bischoff debuts. Like, so Scott Steiner debuts. All these guys debut. Also, it's worth noting here. So I kind of forgot this, but the invasion team WWE, also, by the way, WCW and ECW being joined up just made no sense whatsoever.
Yeah.
ECW hated
always
WCW.
much to the beat of their own drum as well.
And they hated, they were more aligned with the WWF.
Mm-hmm.
They hated WCW. WCW stole their wrestlers and they hated it. Whereas WWF actually looked after ECW a lot over the years, but they hated WCW. So the idea that they were together now was just so ridiculous. But another thing, I never really knew this till later on. Team WCW slash ECW was just known as the Alliance. And I'm not too sure of the ins and outs, but basically when Vince had purchased ECW, I guess some of the assets he didn't acquire at first or whatever it was. But either way, he couldn't use the terms ECW at first, because the first few weeks, the ECW, they're referring to them as ECW and they're wearing like ECW t-shirts. But then after a few weeks, they just stop that and they're just referred to as the Alliance. I don't know if you noticed that.
No.
Yeah, they could, like, they ended up, I think it was like a few years later when they actually got the proper trademarks for ECW. And I think that's when they started to do like the ECW One Night Stand and everything else. But yeah, the first few weeks in the Invasion, they're all ECW branded and then just boom, stopped. They're the Alliance. So, I mean, this is already just, you want to bill it, it really should just be WWF versus WCW. That's all it should be. And then you've added ECW into it, but now it's WWE or WWF versus the Alliance. Is like, oh boy. Another thing that no one really talks about is they came up with a new logo for WCW. This red logo that you see all over the show. This was never a WCW logo. The logo that WCW was using just before this, which they had only used for the last like previous couple of years of WCW, the spaceship logo, fans called it. It's actually terrible. It's so busy and it's so bad. It doesn't even look like. For years I saw that logo and didn't even realize it said WCW. But either way, WWF just come up with its whole new logo, and you would have thought they would have just used the original WCW logo, but at the same time, maybe there was issues. I do not know. What is funny about this is I'm good friends with, well, maybe we wouldn't say good friends, but acquaintances with Conrad Thompson. And I asked him once, I said, oh, on this episode of your Something to Wrestle with Bruce Pritchard, could you ask him why they changed the logo, how they got this new red logo and everything else? I've always been interested by that. And so I listened to the podcast. Conrad asked Bruce Pritchard, and Bruce just completely blew it off. He just said, what? There wasn't a new logo. He's like, oh yeah, there was. He's like, I don't remember that. It's like, okay. So
what a missed opportunity, man.
Never got my question answered from Bruce Pritchard. Oh. So that's obviously something
like
that
the logo.
You do. Well, it's not terrible. I'm not bashing it. I'm not bashing it. I'm just saying it was just completely new for this.
Yeah, for this
rebrand, I guess.
Bespoke rebrand. Yeah, and nobody knows where it came from. What's your opinion on the logo, like visually? I think it's cool.
No, I thought it was definitely better than WCW's like last logo. That's for sure. So no, I didn't hate it. It's just, again, it's random that they just if they wanted this invasion to feel authentic, they've already haven't got the top stars. They've already got Shane McMahon being the leader of the WCW.
And now the branding is unfamiliar.
And now it's a new logo. Yeah. It's kind of like, this doesn't feel authentic whatsoever.
No, I see that. They could have waited and had the actual stars and had something a lot better. But if you just talk about financially, as a short-term move, we looked at the buy rates and it's in the top 15 of all time. So it doesn't seem like it was necessarily a wasted opportunity, just probably suboptimal as a long-term strategy.
Sure. I mean, financially, yeah, I guess this wasn't it wasn't a disaster, obviously. It wasn't like that ECW December to Dismember pay-per-view they did in 2006, wherever it was, 7 or 8 maybe. But, dude, WCW versus WWF done properly
would have been
could have been like the biggest thing of all time. It could have been the biggest.
That's like a dream scenario.
They could have, and there's so many dream matches that they could have done, and it could have been the biggest thing in wrestling history. The wrestling Monday Night Wars was so hot. The period was then. They could have brought all those fans back in this year and the next year and everything else. But dude, they weren't going to do it with just DDP and Booker T, and not even
Booker T,
but a DDP that's not even presented like a top guy. They weren't going to do it with Sean O'Hare and Sean
Right.
Stasiak and all these guys. It just,
Yeah.
dude, it's such a missed opportunity, and people have talked about it forever. But again, what I wanted to know going into this show, I was like, okay, let's watch this show and let's put all that stuff aside. Let's not have in our heads, oh, it should be Goldberg, it should be Sting, it should be the NWO, it should be Flair.
Mhm.
Let's watch it and pretend that this is just a normal WWF show.
Yeah.
Is the show that everything else, put that away, like, oh, what it should have been, what it could have been. Let's watch the show and just actually see if this from start to finish is a good show. So that was my attitude when coming to watch this.
Gotcha. I'm kind of on the same idea as you. However, at the same time, it's kind of hard to divorce, isn't it? Like,
No,
when
it
you
is.
know what could have been, it's really hard to kind of just put those feelings aside. It's super tough.
It is, and we're gonna get into it much more later. But like, for example, it's so crazy that they've done this ECW, they've added ECW, right? But the only wrestlers that they've actually brought in from ECW for this are Tommy Dreamer and Rob Van Dam. The other members, you got Lance Storm and Mike Awesome, who were in ECW, but they'd already been on WWF TV as WCW guys.
Mm-hmm.
So they're like converting them into ECW guys, even though they end up joining the Alliance again later that night. Then you've got 6 ECW guys: Rhino, Just Incredible, Raven, Taz, and Dudley Boys. I think that's right. Other than the Dudley Boys, all those guys were like not even mid card, like low card guys. Well, I guess Rhino, maybe mid card, but I just don't really understand why they even did the ECW part, because all they really had was Rob Van Dam and Tommy Dreamer. I do remember at the time hearing that WWF had signed Rob Van Dam and they were planning for him to be a part of the WCW Nitro like launch. Obviously that never happened, but it just seems so strange that they must have started this WCW thing and just instantly thought, this sucks, how can we make it more exciting, and just had that sort of mentality of more is more, and just I will add ECW to it. I do wonder, could they just paid out like a few of these contracts to get a few guys, even if they just got Goldberg and Sting? It really wouldn't have cost that much in the grand scheme of things.
Right.
If they've got to pay those guys $2 million a year, just pay that $4 million and the whole thing could have been salvaged. You know what I'm saying?
Mm-hmm.
Like, I know it's kind of, they can't have one rule for ones and not for the other, but yeah, just busy and messy. I just think it's difficult, and it's always easy in retrospect to look back and, say, oh, you should have done this.
What if, yeah.
Could they not have just waited and
invested in it a little more? Yeah.
Right, and maybe I don't know how they could have done it, because I guess they had all this mid card talent. Did they just have them waiting, and did they just pay them to not do anything, or could they have started a WCW show and just had them on it and just? But then again, they couldn't get a WCW show full stop, so it's difficult.
It is hard.
It's really difficult. I think because a lot of those guys that they signed, they ended up sending them either they didn't even make it to WWF TV, they sent them straight to developmental. But then there was a lot of guys that they brought straight onto TV from WCW, like your Sean O'Hare's and Mark Jindrags, that then after the Invasion angle, they sent back to developmental. So I don't know if they could have just, all majority guys had them in developmental where they wouldn't have been seen, and then the top guys like the Booker T and DDP just be like, okay, you gotta wait for these deals to run out. I don't know. It's difficult. Or do they just pay the money and do the biggest and greatest thing in wrestling history? That seems to be what they should have done. Can you I wonder if that would have happened, what the wrestling industry would look like now.
Like
maybe
I know.
Maybe it'd be
that's
worse.
The
Who
type of thing
knows?
I couldn't stop thinking about when I was watching this. Is I was just going down this alternative timeline.
Like maybe, I mean, maybe it would have made wrestling boomed so much, and now we'd have double the audience that we do. but maybe it would have just like reached such a height that it could never
Recover. Yeah.
recover from or replicate,
Yeah.
and
Yeah.
maybe numbers would be down now. It's so hard to
Yeah.
predict, isn't it? But
It is. But this is the path of fate that we're on, and we
This
have
is-
to review
I know.
Invasion.
We probably should get into the show.
We
So,
probably should.
first match, Edge and Christian representing the WWF defeat Mike Awesome and Lance Storm, who representing ECW, in 10 minutes and 10 seconds. So, Mike Awesome returns to the show. I will say this. This actually was probably the second best match on the show. It was a pretty damn good match. There's something about Mike Awesome that here, at least in the WWF, there's something missing. I don't know if he's a big guy. I don't know if he like crouches down or he doesn't have that connection with the audience, or he doesn't make that eye contact with the camera. But Mike Awesome, in ECW, they managed to put him on a pedestal and he come across like a big star. Here in the WWF, he just comes across like a job guy. It's kind of bad when Lance Storm comes off as having more charisma than you. But yeah, this was a hot opener. I think at this point, Edge and Christian were going to go into a program together, but they ended up, because it's Invasion angle, it got put on hold, so they're teaming up again. Super hot opener. Twice at the start, 2 people nearly died, so I guess there's a tradition there going with Mike Awesome matches. Lance Storm gets backdropped out the ring to land on Mike Awesome and pretty much lands on his head. And then 2 seconds later, Christian goes to run and jump off the ropes to dive on them both. And he like trips on the ropes and hits the floor head first pretty much. So that was pretty spectacle. But the match itself was a great match. Lance Storm, this is the best I think I've ever seen Lance Storm in this match. Edge and Christian, always great. Christian, amazing bumper. Very underrated, I think, Christian. Here, I think he's leaps and bounds above Edge, personally, in this match. Mike Awesome, he seems like the odd one out, but he does do his part here, and I think it was the right match to open the show. What say you, Sam?
Yeah, I generally agree. I feel like you're harder on Lance Storm generally than I am. I've always liked Lance Storm, but he was like particularly good here. They were representing ECW. Were they not in WCW at the time?
Oh, okay. No, they joined ECW. Exactly. It's confusing already. They came in as WCW, then they joined the ECW in the angle that I just explained.
Oh.
Yes.
Okay. Right.
Yes.
All right. Yeah, pretty good match. Edge and Christian are one of the best WWF tag teams, so it was a good representative pick. I agree with you totally on Christian. Do you know what? I'm not too big on Edge and Christian separately. Edge is always one of those people. He seems like a great guy and he is captivating, but I've always wondered why he became like a main eventer. I never really got that. But together, I think they're absolutely fantastic. I feel like Christian is underrated. I did notice Edge also nearly died. He does like I don't know what it's called, like a rolling drop kick thing. And when he landed, he lands and the bottom rope like ricochets his neck. He lands on his head on the bottom rope, which is pretty grim. But yeah, I also like, I said Lance Storm. Mike Awesome, I think this is the first match I've seen of his in WWF. You said he's got like some disconnect here. There's something missing. Did you mean just for this match or just during his time in WWF? Because I'm curious.
Yeah, his WWF run, he just came across as such a job guy.
Interesting. I wonder what that was. He doesn't look like a different guy without he needs the mullet in my opinion.
Yeah, maybe it's the mullet.
I think that's where he gets his power.
Did you watch this match and thought Mike Awesome came across like a star?
No,
he doesn't. And they're giving him a great opportunity here. They're giving him 10 minutes to do a match with 2 of the top guys in the company, Edge and Christian. This match is one of the longer matches on the show. I didn't think he really showed out whatsoever.
Do you reckon it's possible that he just didn't want to be there?
No,
because that's what it feels like.
Maybe he was having problems at the time. I think he ended up having his demons and everything else, and maybe that was coming into play here. I do not know. He did go to WCW after he was in ECW, and he kind of got slammed with some bad gimmicks there. They made him what was it? That 70s guy, Mike Awesome. And then they made him, so he was like a 70s guy. It was really, really bad. Then they made him the fat chick thriller, where his gimmick was that he liked fat chicks. So I don't know, maybe that kind of killed all his
momentum.
Or killed his
buzz. Yeah.
Right. And so, but here I didn't think Mike Awesome stood out at all.
Absent, yeah.
Yeah, he just seemed like
he just seemed like Mike okay.
He was not quite awesome. He was Mike okay.
Mike okay.
Great match, really good finish. Mike Awesome gets up Edge for the Awesome Bomb, and Christian comes in and spears him, and Edge lands on top of him. 1, 2, 3.
Yeah, and the referee just, despite the fact that it was pure interference, just was like, yeah, okay, I'll count it, which I liked. Yeah, it's kind of odd.
Yeah, no, it was
good finish. Yeah,
good finish. I thought it was a really good opening match. So far,
I know. So far, so good. That's how I thought as well. Yeah,
it's a good start, and
it was a good opener.
Not only are we happy, but apparently Vince McMahon is happy because we see him celebrating Edge and Christian's win backstage with Commissioner Regal, who informs Vince that Stone Cold Steve Austin and Deborah have arrived. Mr. McMahon said that given Deborah's abduction, he wanted to give Austin a little time to himself. Vince then motivated Regal for his match tonight against Raven. Ooh, we can't wait to see that one. So if there was any sign that we're lacking star power in this WWF versus WCW Invasion, the fans for years, they've been dreaming of this show. They wanted to see Hogan versus The Rock. They want to see Austin versus Goldberg. They want to see Sting versus The Undertaker. And unfortunately, we don't get those matches, but we do get the next match as Earl Hebner takes on Nick Patrick. Yes, this is the Invasion angle. This match kind of sums up the pay-per-view, just like
I think so.
We're trying to come up with matches for this show. We can have the referees wrestle each other. Just like,
I mean,
this would have been a funny match to have on like one of the TV episodes to build the whole thing.
The same.
Like,
yeah,
even the referees are at arms with each other. That would be fun. But the fact this is the second match on this pay-per-view that people had dreamt of for years, it's like, come on. And again, ironically, the match I thought was actually quite entertaining. It was only, I'll get to it. It's Earl Hebner defeats Nick Patrick, who's representing WCW, in 2 minutes and 50 seconds. So not long, and it was entertaining. Mick Foley is a special guest referee, and it does put the WWF. It's actually puts them up 2-0 to WCW, but they later in the show say that Chavo Guerrero defeated Scotty 2 Hotty on Sunday Night Heat, taped before Invasion. So technically now we're at 2-1. But the match itself was actually pretty entertaining. But just the fact that we're supposed to be seeing the WWF versus WCW, and we're getting the referees fighting each other, it's just, you can't really put that to the back of your brain. It's just, I don't like. Did this need to be on pay-per-view?
Right.
I don't think so.
Right. I'm gonna get hit for this, but honestly, when the package came out, I actually thought it was quite an interesting concept. I know people are just gonna groan at that, but I was like, okay. I mean, that is kind of interesting. If you bring everyone over, the idea that one of the referees that's brought over is biased towards his team and he should be calling it down the middle is kind of interesting.
No, it is, yeah.
But it was never obviously going to make a good match. We understand that. But
no.
It wasn't, like you said, it's kind of entertaining still. But yeah, it was just not the place for it. The pay-per-view was not the place for it.
Yeah, and I think even
slot.
Yeah, I think if they'd even done it later in the show, maybe it wouldn't be so offensive. But just being the second match, it just seemed like this is what we're getting from this Invasion angle. It just, like, you got so little WCW talent that you've got to have the referees wrestle each other. I don't know. I mean, Nick Patrick was for years the heel referee in WCW, and he was the NWO's referee for quite a while. And while I was watching this, I was like, oh, Nick Patrick, he looks like he can work. Like, I was thinking, did he used to be a wrestler or not? I can't remember, but I thought to myself, I'm pretty positive he used to be a wrestler. So I looked him up, and sure enough, yes, he used to wrestle a little bit in the territory days, because you can kind of tell here he knows how to work. Earl Hebner, on the other hand, not so much. Another funny thing about this, I thought the most interesting thing is, so Earl Hebner comes out with all the other WWF referees, and Nick Patrick comes out with the WCW ones,
Mhm.
and the WWF ones already completely outnumber the WCW ones. And I noticed one of Nick Patrick's WCW referees is actually Brian Hebner, who is Earl Hebner's son,
Oh,
who,
really?
to my knowledge, never refereed for WCW ever. So I'm pretty sure they were just like, they probably
Making up
only
the
had
numbers?
2 or 3 WCW referees. Like, oh, we need to make up the numbers. Oh, Earl, can your son pretend to be a WCW referee? So, who did
Talk
go on?
about inauthentic.
Right,
earlier. Now
exactly.
you have this. If you see that and you notice that, it just
Absolutely. Yeah, it just yeah, so that was funny. But this whole thing was kind of cat fighting.
It
Like I
was-
said,
yeah.
I actually thought it was actually, for what it was entertaining.
Yes, it was reasonably entertaining. And why I love wrestling is this kind of stuff. Again, this wasn't the place for it, but in reality, if you had a ref that just couldn't call it down the middle, you let go of that ref. You fire that ref. But in wrestling, it's like, what do we do? Ref versus ref. That's why I watch it. But for a pay-per-view,
yeah,
maybe not.
And this pay-per-view in particular. I've seen this for years, but I only started thinking about it when I was watching this show. When Mick Foley does the special guest referee, because he's done it a whole bunch in his career, he has his shirt which is painted himself with, it looks like spray paint, like spray painted the stripes on his shirt. I always wondered why he did that. Was it supposed to be like his gimmick is that he's cheap and he didn't want to buy a referee shirt? Or I don't know what the sort of psychology behind that was.
I always assumed it was like a callback to his like backyard VHS days. I think that's what it's supposed to be.
Really? I didn't think that. You might be, I don't know. I thought it was more, you might be right. I thought it was more that he's idea that he's like cheap or something, or maybe because the gimmick of Mick Foley is so unhinged that he couldn't wear an official referee shirt, maybe.
I just think it was a throwback to his like grassroots wrestling beginnings. It's just who he is, kind of guy.
Maybe we need to do
we'll
like
to
a
figure
top
that out.
10 or maybe top 5 special guest referee outfits, because on our episodes SummerSlam 1991, you want to say it, the Sid Vicious tank top or muscle vest, which is you seem to really enjoy that one.
I couldn't stand it.
I
thought you were going to say
awesome.
you've got Kimberly Page or you got Mick Foley, who wore it better.
Oh, what did she wear? She had like did she have a referee shirt or not?
Yeah.
Oh, she did. Okay, so she could be in it. And then, have you ever seen Shawn Michaels, special guest referee?
Oh yeah, of course. He's got the cutoff, right?
The tank top, but then like the little biker shorts.
Yeah.
And we need to do that.
He gives Kimberly a run for her money, actually.
Shawn Michaels could be number 1. I think if you ask people who has the best special guest referee outfit, most people are going to say Shawn Michaels. But I want to do a little bit more research, and maybe I'll make either an Instagram
we need a top
post
5 or a top 10.
A video. A top 10 might be difficult, maybe. But I think
5.
Top 5 we could probably do. Last thing I'll say about this match, the crowd is going nuts throughout the whole match as well, by the way. It's a hot crowd.
But most of the pay-per-view was a hot crowd. There's some exceptions that we'll get to, but yeah, it was a good crowd. Also, second time in a row this week and last week we're in Ohio.
Oh, really? I didn't even notice that.
Yep. We were there last week for Heatwave.
Okay, backstage we see Deborah and Sarah. For those who don't know, Sarah was Undertaker's real life wife, which I guess he decided to bring on to TV. Deborah went to get some coffee, and she's clearly upset about what happened to her on SmackDown, of course, being abducted. Sarah, the Undertaker's wife, told Deborah that DDP was indeed a psycho. So, for those who don't know, I guess we're going to get into it later, but they had brought DDP into the WWF, not as the WCW People's Champion, but as Undertaker's wife's stalker. They gave him the stalker gimmick to DDP. DDP, for his whole run in WCW as a top guy, was a big baby face, a big hero. They've decided to make as a heel, and he's going to feud with The Undertaker, and he's going to be stalking Undertaker's wife, who the audience doesn't actually care about either. So this was just one whole other mess.
Just another missed opportunity.
Just have him as DDP.
He's there. You've got him. He's ready to go out of the box, and they change him up.
I can understand that they bring DDP in, and Vince sees him, and he's like 45, and he thinks, maybe Vince wasn't a fan of DDP's work, okay, or he didn't see anything in DDP, and that's fine. But for the sake of this invasion angle that are going to run for months and months, and these pay-per-views, would you not just present him like a top guy just to salvage these shows? Like, what would be the harm in that? Even if you weren't particularly a fan of him, could they not? This one I just did not understand. You're lacking star power. There's no star power. You have one of the genuine stars. He's actually the biggest star out of them all that they got from WCW. He was bigger star than Booker T, DDP, because he was around he's a big star in 97, 98, the peak years of WCW. Why did they not present him as a top star? I get Just Incredible being a top star in ECW and not in the WWF. Okay, can live with that. But DDP, like, you had him. You had no stars. The one that you did have, and you just present him like a schmuck. And I'm sure they'll say, well, it's down to the performer or whatever. But like, dude, that stalker gimmick, they would argue, WWF, I'm sure, you're being brought in on top. You're working with Undertaker. Like, is that being presented like a schmuck? Like, getting to work with arguably the greatest WWF wrestler of all time and most famous? But dude, he just got his ass kicked by Undertaker the whole entire time. I think DDP ended up losing a match to Sarah, Undertaker's wife. They had a thing at King of the Ring where they didn't even have a match. They just had 6 minutes of the Undertaker beating up DDP. The people didn't want to see DDP as a heel. They didn't want to see him stalk the Undertaker's wife. Was the storyline not enough? WCW versus WWF. Was that not enough? This is so hat on a hat. It just really grinds my gears.
A lot of the logic was questionable in these decisions, but this one is probably the most baffling. Like, specifically, is why? Okay, like you said, if Vince doesn't really see what's there in DDP, can't he, like you said, for the sake of the pay-per-view or for the sake of the angle, trust the fans on this one, even if you don't see it yourself? So you have something to bring to the table for WCW. Utterly baffling, very frustrating.
I know DDP kind of almost regrets this run, and it's funny because years later the WWF has celebrated DDP and they put him in the Hall of Fame and everything else, and they've had him come out and they presented him as a legend and everything else. They just didn't do it here in his run when they needed him to be a big star. So it was crazy, but
he almost regrets this run. What did they have to do to make him fully regret it? You think if he only it wasn't. Oh man, it was sore. I'm sore on this one. Big DDP fan. So,
well, Sam, I'm going to ask you: are you sore on this one? Because the next match, the APA representing the WWF defeat Chuck Palumbo and Sean O'Haire representing WCW in 6 minutes and 48 seconds to put the WWF in a 3-1 lead. So, I was always a big fan of Sean O'Haire. And I think I was a big fan of him because he was jacked and he could do very athletic stuff for his size. I haven't watched a Sean O'Haire match in years and years and years. And you can tell me if you thought the same thing, but watching this match back, I thought, wow, Sean O'Haire was super duper green here in this match. And to be fair, he'd only been wrestling a few years, so it makes sense. But as a youngster, as a fan that had never wrestled before, I didn't really notice it at the time. But now, watching it from a performer's eyes, I'm like, whoa, Sean O'Haire was not really ready to be on a main stage yet.
No, and APA, whether you like them or not, are veterans by this point.
Yes.
And it just makes it even, and it just makes it even more apparent. I've got to say, nothing dates this pay-per-view more than O'Haire's look with his hair and the awful facial hair and his
spiky
necklace.
hair.
Yeah, he looks like he should be on Survivor. That show
Yeah.
Survivor. doesn't
Or
he?
he looks like either it could either be a boy band or like a new metal band, but
Or something like that. Yeah.
jacked on loads of steroids, like
But,
the goatee
yeah.
in the hair.
Yeah.
Like, yeah, he does. And it's funny because the APA kind of stood up during this whole Alliance Invasion storyline, where the idea was like they're using kind of what was reality of the APA being locker room leaders, and they kind of turned that into, it was kind of became the online, on screen, on TV characters, the APA, kind of the backstage locker room leaders, Bradshaw kind of bad mouthing WCW wrestlers, which I think at the time, it's been so many reports that there was that real animosity when the WCW wrestlers came in, because there were so many of them. Everyone on the WWF roster had obviously fought for their spots, and now they're bringing in 20, 30 guys that are all coming for those guys' spots. So, and guys back then, if they didn't work and they didn't get put on shows, they didn't make any money. So people were very protective of their spots. So there was a lot of animosity towards the WCW wrestlers, and they kind of told that with this whole Invasion storyline, and APA were kind of like the leaders of it all. Chuck Palumbo is actually way better than I remember him being, and I'm actually kind of surprised that he didn't have a better run in the WWF. He did stay there for quite a few years, and he did the Chuck and Billy thing, obviously.
Yeah.
Then later on, they made him part of the FBI, and then he was a biker dude, kind of much like the American Badass Undertaker. But he was there for years and years, but never got any higher than the mid card. I'd say the height of his career was probably the Billy and Chuck stuff. But I'm going to be honest. I appreciate Ron Simmons. I appreciate Bradshaw. I really love JBL. I was never really into the APA whatsoever. I liked the backstage segments. That was really pretty entertaining stuff. Their matches I kind of zone out.
I really like the APA. Always liked the APA as a kid. You are right. The backstage segments where they're playing cards on those little tables, and they've got the door frame, but there's no walls. I remember it all very vividly. Carried them pretty well. In ring, I also, as a kid, really liked them just because they do all the power moves. The Dominator is awesome. Maybe you disagree.
When he hits it, he never hits it.
Well, that's true, actually. Right. I do like the APA. I like both of them. JBL, I did think was a much better gimmick. I hope we can cover that a lot later on. But no, I have always liked the APA. This match, though, I got my power move, so I'm happy. This was a dud for me, this match.
I can't remember.
I don't really have anything. I'm looking at my notes. I don't really have anything to say on it.
Two things. The APA, of course, they were the Acolytes originally in like 99, and they were part of the Undertaker's ministry. Here, they've been at the APA for at least a year, if not probably more actually, and they're still just wearing Acolytes tights. I was thinking, like, can you guys not buy some new tights and just say APA on them? Like,
I never thought of that. You're right.
Yeah.
They've got the T-shirt sorted out.
Yeah.
But they've still got their Acolyte style. Yeah. Oh my God. Right. I never thought of that.
They remember the Acolytes, they used to have the symbols on their chest.
The symbolism
They stopped wearing, they obviously didn't bother putting on the face paint, still good, or the chest paint, but they're still wearing Acolytes tights. I also noticed that
I never clocked that until now.
Yeah, and Sean O'Haire and Chuck Palumbo, so they were a tag team in WCW, and I don't know if they were trying to go for the thing where they're a tag team, but they have separate gear, kind of like what Edge and Christian did, or they just didn't bother to get matching gear, because I kind of thought like that, like, you guys are debuting for the WWF, like, they're pushing you as a tag team, you might want to get some tag team gear made, but I guess they didn't, unless they were trying to go for the let's not have matching gear. Me personally, I'm a big fan of tag teams with the matching gear and the matching looks. What say you, Sam?
Oh, 100%. I mean, I can't... Edge and Christian are probably the only example against that. I think you picked the only one. I can't think of any others. Like every tag team I think of that like look.
I mean, there's New Age Outlaws and Rock and Sock Connection. There's teams like that.
I still don't think they're. No, I still don't.
No. I'm saying
like come to. Oh no, there are. Yes.
There's tag teams that don't wear the same gear. Is what I'm saying.
Right. No,
Yeah.
there are, but also like the Rock and Sockwood. I mean, they're two different guys put together, so that's
Well, that's
kind of
any. You could argue that as any, but that, you're saying that because they didn't have matching gear. Every tag team was two guys put together.
no, but there were two guys separately, then got put together. Whereas Edge and Christian, as far as I'm aware,
But
were
that's
came
no,
through as a tag team initially, right?
yeah, but that
And the
doesn't
Nasty
really
Boys and the
that doesn't really change my point. I'm saying like, yeah, it's just. Do you prefer tag teams to have matching gear?
100%, yeah. And
Yeah.
obviously, I guess if you want to count the Rock and Sock, there's going to be exception. Like there's going to be times when it needs an exception, like the Brothers of Destruction. That'd be weird if they both look like Kane for some reason, or whatever, or the Undertaker, just because they're together.
But wouldn't that be
wouldn't work?
But wouldn't that be cool if they kind of had some kind of matching thing when they became a tag team? I don't know.
I wouldn't like that. So
okay,
there
so
are
now you're going
exceptions.
now you're going back on what you said. Yeah.
No, if they come through as a tag team, they have to have matching stuff for me.
So
If they're two singles stars that get put together, they're okay without. matching.
Okay,
That's my rule.
I get you. Okay.
Except for Edge and Christian. Except for Edge and Christian.
But Edge and Christian, they still kind of look like each other at least, or similar physiques, long,
Oh, I guess
long blonde
similar hair,
hair.
yeah,
Do you know what I mean? And their tights were maybe they weren't matching, but they were normally pretty similar vein at least, I guess. So it's not like, it wasn't like Edge being with Albert, for example. Like Edge and Christian, they looked like a tag team for sure, right?
Mhm.
Yeah.
Oh, absolutely, yeah.
So that put the WWF 3-1 against WCW. So as it stands, WCW is not doing so well. But go on, sorry.
I've got to ask you this because I know this kind of includes you for us to a certain extent. But like, what do you think of like finishers or special trademark moves that are just moves? So I know yours is a little bit different. Like the chicken wing, it's kind of like ironically done, but like just like a clothesline.
Oh,
Bradshaw I'm just gonna do a clothesline. That's job done. I'm not a fan of that, but I have to ask you.
well, it's not a clothesline. It's a lariat.
Oh, it's from hell. Oh, okay.
It's a lariat.
Yes. Okay.
There's a difference. There's a difference. The lariat. Well, there's actually not really a difference. It's kind of more just the emphasis put on it. The lariat as a finish, I actually love. I love the lariat as a finish.
Really?
Maybe that's just because it's more of a thing in Japan. That was Hogan's finish in Japan was the lariat. There's loads of guys. Stan Hansen with the lariat. There's so many guys that used the lariat in Japan. It was a very protective move. Realistically, any move can be a big move. It's just how it's presented, if that makes sense. It can be anything. And the lariat in Japan was very presented as a big move. And it makes sense. Someone running and just ripping your head off. Boom. It does make a lot of sense. I liked Bradshaw's clothesline from hell because it wasn't standing there just doing a on the spot clothesline. He would always do the spot where he was in the corner. The guy would run in for like a stinger splash. He would move out the way, but as you moved out the way, would run, hit the other side of the ring, the ropes, and then come back in and boom, take the head off with the lariat. So personally, I'm a fan of it. I actually love finishing moves that are supposed to be simple moves, or I love finishing moves that aren't supposed to be finishing moves and someone manages to turn them and get them over as a finishing move. Obviously they need to get them over as a finishing move. Of course, I've seen people sometimes like, oh, I'm going to try and do a sliding drop kick as a finish and it doesn't get over. And they keep doing it. That's very flat. But if they can get that move over, like a knee lift or something like that, and get it over, I think that's really, really awesome. Because then to me, it's like you've created something, you've made something and you've built on it. And like I always say, create, not hate. And I really enjoy when people can do that. So, but the clothesline from hell, I really like personally.
Cool. I mean, that's fair enough. Give us some examples of people who've created I'm going to say something from nothing. Like, got over a very simple move. Obviously, you have your crossface chicken wing, but outside of that, give us some other examples.
There was a run in, people might remember this one in Ring of Honor, where Brian Danielson, or Daniel Bryan, would beat up, like knock guys out with his elbow smashes, and then he would beat them with a small package. So he'd always win his matches with a small package and call himself Mr. Small Package, which I thought was pretty funny. But he got the small package over as like a finish. And I think he actually stole the idea from There was a guy that I worked with in Japan called Genki Haraguchi. I believe that's his name, from Dragon Gate. I didn't work him in Japan. I worked him in England, but he was from Japan. And I guess his finisher was the backslide from hell. And I can't remember if the whole thing was every match he would try for the backslide in hell, but it wouldn't work. Maybe I'm getting confused. No, I think that's how he won every match. He'd always win his match with like a different variation of the backslide. And I always thought that was really, really cool. But there's loads more. I'm trying to think of now wrestlers that have like a simple finish that I really enjoy. Like, for example, Alistair Black or Malachi Black, Tommy End. I remember, obviously, I was on the indies with him for years, and he would always do like a different finishing move. And sometimes he'd do a double stomp off the top, sometimes he would do a brainbuster. But I remember him hitting that spinning back kick, which he now calls the, what does he call it? The black, I can't remember what it's called. Damn, I should know this. Black Mass. I think it's called the Black Mass. His spinning heel kick. I mean, he used to just do that on the indies as just like a move, or at least a false finish. And I remember saying to him, not saying that it was my idea or anything else, but I did say to him once, it's like, Tommy, that's like the best move you do. That's the most impressive. You should use that as a finish. And then I think when he went to WWE, he did end up using it as a finish. And again, I'm not trying to take credit for it. But he did that, and it was like, I think they really added to his character and everything else. They had this lethal kick in his offense. So personally, like I said, I think the most simpler moves as finishes are better. You don't want some move where you've got to put the guy's arm between his legs and hoist him up and get him on the shoulder, then spin him this way. I just think it seems like too much. I think there's greatness in simplicity, easy for me to say. And I think it goes the same for the moves. I think the kids should be able to be like, oh, stunner, like RKO or Diamond Cutter, arguably one of the greatest moves of all time. It's just so simple. Everyone can do it. They can see it and know what it is straight away. So like the RKO, when Randy Orton does it, the building goes absolutely insane. You see guys on the indies, you watch an indie show now, and there's 20 different cutter variations throughout the whole show, and they get a tiny little piece of the action that Randy Orton's
of a pot,
sliver compared to Randy Orton's standard one. Guys are doing backflips into diamond cutters. They're doing springboards into diamond cutters.
Mm-hmm.
They're doing slingshots into it. They're doing all this different stuff. They're springboards, whatever it is, coming off the top, doing these diamond cutters. But Randy just stands there and jumps and does it, and it gets the biggest reaction, the most over, and the most effective. So, to me...
And of course, The Rock got over an elbow drop.
Well, there we go. The Rock got over an elbow drop. The Hogan with the leg drop. Flair with the figure four. Stone Cold's just a stunner.
Yeah. Jake the Snake was just DDT.
Yeah. I mean, the DDT at the time was actually a pretty like spectacular.
It was kind of, it was, wasn't it?
But yeah, I'm trying to think of modern day. There definitely is some wrestlers that have simple finishes that I really like, and just top of my head, you stumped me. I can't think right now. Or even like AJ Styles when he came to the WWF, they changed he used to do the Styles Clash, but they changed it to the flying forearm, and really enjoy that as well. So yeah, so moving on, where are we? Okay, backstage we see Vince McMahon with Chris Jericho, and basically Jericho warns Vince that Heyman was insane yet intelligent, and he had passed that along to Shane and Stephanie. Vince said that after tonight, WCW and ECW would never be the same again. He does Jericho's catchphrase. We then see a backstage pre-tape with Stephanie, Shane McMahon, Paul Heyman, and Billy Kidman. And Kidman says he will show everyone why X-Pac sucks. Which brings us to the next match. Billy Kidman, representing WCW, defeats X-Pac, representing the WWF, in 7 minutes and 7 seconds. It should also be worth noting that Kidman is the WCW Cruiserweight Champion and X-Pac is the WWF Light Heavyweight Champion, which is actually quite surprising to see on pay-per-view. So this was the first match that the WWF guy was a heel and the WCW guy was a baby face.
Mhm.
And actually, this actually brings up a great point about this whole invasion thing, which people don't talk about. Could they have not done the invasion angle? Did one side need to be the heels and one side need to be the baby faces? Couldn't they have had it where the WWF already has heels and faces, they just stay the same, and WCW has heels and faces and they stay the same? Did it need to be that like one whole promotion was the heels and one whole promotion was the baby face?
Oh, I get your point.
Right?
So, but this is the only example of the opposite, right?
Just for this match in particular, just because, well, Kidman wasn't necessarily a big ass heel, and people at the time were sick of X-Pac, and they had this thing called X-Pac heat that the fans used to talk about, where they were fed up with X-Pac because they thought he got stale and everything else. So
Yeah.
I say, like, they weren't really playing it like X-Pac was the heel and Kidman was the face, but the fans kind of treated it that way. But like I said, it got me thinking, like, why did they have to have all the WCW guys and all the ECW guys be heels? Like, they could have brought DDP in as a babyface, and I'm trying to think of a WWF heel. Like, Stone Cold could have still been a heel, whatever it was. They didn't need to flip flop. Or if you're heel now, you're in WCW. If you're a babyface, you're WWF. What? So all the WCW fans that you're trying to get to watch this whole thing, they're already turned off because they're like, oh,
they're treated like the bad guy.
You're presenting our guys like the bad guys. Like, I don't like this. Like, why? I don't understand why they couldn't have just had all these matches, whatever. And like I said, you could have babyface on WCW side.
It was just us versus them mentality the whole way through.
Right.
And you're right. There was no why they couldn't have had any grey area or anything. Obviously, I mean, it probably comes down because this is Vince McMahon's show.
Right. Of course.
Obviously.
But for money reasons, I just think bring the guys like DDP especially. He should be a baby face, you know.
You're right. Yeah.
Like, automatically all the WCW guys healed. I think that was a big missed opportunity doing that, and a big mistake.
How many times do you reckon we're going to say this was a missed opportunity? Right?
It's the story of the show.
It is.
We're trying to give different viewpoints for this, so we're trying to find some positives. I will say this with this match. So this is match number 4. Billy Kidman comes out and he's pretty generic looking. We spoke about this before on the podcast. Just wearing like black biker shorts, not a whole lot of charisma. Earlier we saw Chuck Palumbo, Sean O'Haire, both of them just boring kind of gear, not a whole lot of charisma. And in the first match, Mike Awesome, Lance Storm, just wearing trunks and tights, not a whole lot of charisma. And I was like, wow, we're 4 matches deep, and the most charisma we've seen from WCW has been from Nick Patrick. It's true. It literally is true.
It is true. Yeah.
Isn't that hilarious? Like, he's the most God. All these WCW guys they had actually got hold of not a whole lot of personality on their mid card of guys. It seems like they all kind of came from the power plant and just hadn't found themselves as characters yet. But getting back to the match, I'm a massive Sean Waltman fan. I love Sean, love X-Pac, loved him growing up, was the biggest fan of him. When I became a wrestler, I got to work with X-Pac. Great human being. He's one of my all-time heroes. So watching X-Pac is always enjoyable for me. I always kind of hated the fact that this period people kind of turned on X-Pac and they weren't a fan of him. He made this stable with Albert and Just Incredible, the X Factor, which just didn't work at all, other than their kind of cool song that people like to remember. But it just wasn't working for X-Pac at the time. This match, it's only 7 minutes and 7 seconds, which actually surprised me. But I thought this was one of the better matches, and this actually seemed like it's WWF Light Heavyweight Champion versus Cruiserweight Champion, or WCW Cruiserweight Champion. This seems like more in place of the sort of matches we should be seeing on the WWF versus WCW show, right?
This was a better representation of what both sides can do. Yeah, I thought the exact same thing. Yeah, loads of boos for X-Pac. That's interesting that I didn't know that the fans were against him around that time. I like this match too. The pace was improved for this match compared to the last couple.
Yes.
Nice quick pace, nice and zippy. I like both guys. You really like X-Pac. I like them
Yeah.
both.
Yeah.
It was good. I did like the Bronco counter
Mm-hmm.
where he just does the big boot right into his beanbag, which I
Absolutely. Yeah.
liked a lot. I
Xbox did
actually
that a lot.
rewound it.
Yeah.
Oh, really?
That was
I
kind of
don't
one
think
of
I've seen it too much.
Xbox go to cut off spots was going for the Bronco Buster. The guy just puts the boot up. Yeah.
I thought it was good. Yeah, I like that a lot. Made me laugh. Yeah, I mean, it was pretty good. You said it was just over 7 minutes. Did you say?
Just over 7 minutes. You know, actually,
No.
this ties in really well. We just had this conversation about basic finishers. And one of my conversations once with X-Pac, so much like everyone, X-Pac, Sean, loved the fact that I did the finger break and the.
Mm.
I think people forget that when I first started doing that on the scene, it was like a really big deal that people talked about in wrestling. And even when I met Stone Cold Steve Austin, he said to me, put his hand out to me, put his hand out with his fingers and said, "Okay, kid, show me how you do it." And for the longest time, nobody knew how I did it. And everyone was like, "How does he do it?" And it was a really big part of my act that I had worked on and everything else. I had really developed that into what it become. Unfortunately, look, of course, anytime something gets over in wrestling, everyone just borrows, or I'm just going to come out and say it, steals it, and then it kind of gets overexposed. And that's what happened with the finger snap. So many guys just kind of took it, and to the point where I was kind of like, I don't even want to do it anymore. But my fans want to see me do it. So I'm like, okay, I do. I'm still the originator of it. I'm still the guy that invented it and everything else. And I worked hard for that. So I should do it still, right? But yeah, like I said, no one used to know how it was done. I feel like because all these other guys did it and not as well, now people know. But Xbox loved it. And he was like, like your most over move should be your finish, which I agree with. And he was saying, like, I feel like the finger snap should be your finish. And I was kind of like, I completely understand what he was saying, but I'm just like, okay, Sean, but how do I incorporate that into a finish? Like, do they tap out when they grab their finger and then I snap it? Do I snap their fingers and then they take a bump and I pin them 1, 2, 3? Like, I don't. Maybe that would have worked. I don't know. My compromise was I kind of stole what he did. I was like, okay, well, I'll snap their fingers. They can turn their back to me and I put them in the chicken wing. How about that? And it's funny because he would say to me, my finish really is the Bronco Buster. Like the X Factor is just to get them down for the pin, but the Bronco Buster is the big pop. So X-Pac, at least on his run after WWF, his end of his match would be the Bronco Buster. He gets off, they feed out, kick them in the gut. X Factor, 1, 2, 3. So yeah, I'm a big believer in that. The move that you do that gets the biggest reaction should be your finish. Much like Shawn Michaels, when he was trying to do his singles run after breaking up from the Rockers, he was trying to do like a teardrop back suplex as a finish. But he would do the super kick or the sweet chin music earlier in the match. And I think it was Razor Ramon, Scott Hall, that said to him, "Hey, the super kick is the best move you do. That should be a finish." And that's when Shawn took that and started using it as his finish, and obviously became a really big part of Shawn Michaels' act. But no, I always remember that conversation with Shawn. So maybe one day I'll try and get the finger snap over as a finish. But and he's probably right. I think the Bronco Buster probably is more memorable than the X Factor, or got a better reaction than the X Factor. Here they do a spot where Kidman jumps off the top rope and X-Pac catches him in an X Factor in the middle of the ring.
Yeah.
But it's just a 2 count. Again, this happened with the Kidman match we watched from Survivor Series 2002, which was also about 7 minutes. These light heavyweight matches, it seems like they're just trying to fit as much in the match as possible.
Yeah. Rikishi's Rikishi Driver is a legitimately devastating move, but nobody even thinks of that, right? What do they think of? It's the stink face.
His finish is the stink face. I'll tell you another one. Mick Foley with the Sarko. Like, what was Mick Foley's even finish? The double arm DDT?
Double arm DDT, but yeah, you're right.
That was nothing. That was nothing, huh?
It's the mandible claw, yeah.
Mandible claw. So,
yeah, you're right.
Yeah, Rikishi is the stink face, right?
Yeah.
So, there are some good examples. This match though was one of the better matches or more enjoyable matches on the show. Wouldn't you agree?
I would agree. Yeah, totally.
Once again, we go backstage. Shane, Stephanie, Paul Heyman are joined by DDP, who they're now celebrating their first win of the night with Billy Kidman winning his match over X-Pac. And DDP's somewhat bragging about what he did on SmackDown, referencing to the fact that he abducted Deborah. Shane tells DDP he needs to focus on tonight and that DDP is now in Austin's head. Wrestling loves a good abduction storyline, it seems.
I mean, yeah, what have we had? We had that thing with Goldust that was ripping off the... Oh, no, that wasn't an abduction, was it? That was a car chase.
Yeah, car chase, yeah.
Yeah. What other abductions have we had?
There seems to be a lot on AEW. It's normally where a guy will be in the ring and then his opponent or the guy he's feuding with will come up on the screen and they'll be doing a promo. Then it will zoom out and they'll have their opponent's like manager or tag team partner normally beat up and they're tied up and
hog
tape over their mouth. And it's just like this abduction stuff in wrestling. It's a little silly. I'm not the biggest fan of it. And dude, I guess we'll get into it in the show with Steve Austin, this whole heel turn. And even before the heel turn, his real life wife was Deborah, and they decided to make that a thing on TV. Much like the Undertaker deal with Sarah, we don't want to see Stone Cold Steve Austin's wife. We just want to see Stone Cold being a badass. So when you abduct his wife, it's not actually getting anyone any heat because no one really cares. They don't want to see Deborah with Austin. They might want to see Deborah, but not with Austin. It's just, oh man, this whole Austin. We'll get into it later in the show.
I agree, yeah. Quickly, so Sarah was she not a WCW girl or anything? She's just literally his wife, Undertaker's wife.
Real life wife, and she was, as far as I know, never she was not a wrestler. She was not in the wrestling business whatsoever.
Oh.
Just Undertaker's real life wife that he decided to start putting on TV, as far as I know and remember, yeah. So
I seem to recall Deborah being around before this.
Oh, Deborah was. Yeah, I was talking about Sarah. Yeah, Deborah had been.
Yeah, no, I know, but I mean, she's got some at least like professional wrestling adjacent credentials.
Oh yeah,
just being the wife. Okay.
Well, I think originally she was Steve McMichael's wife, Mongo's wife, right?
I don't know who that is.
Oh, we'll have to get into him one day. But yeah, she'd been a valet for years. Like I said, people might want to see Deborah. I'm not knocking her. They don't want to see Stone Cold Steve Austin with Deborah.
Gotcha.
I
agree.
Something that people might want to see was backstage with Tori Wilson and Stacy Keibler. They cut a promo to build up their bra and panties match, and Tori grabs her breasts and says to Stacy something along the lines of, "Look at these." I hope I get this word right. I've never used this word, so I'm probably going to butcher it. She says, "My voluptuous breast." My voluptuous. Is that the word?
Voluptuous. You had it right the first time.
Oh, we did. Voluptuous breast.
Have more faith in yourself.
Oh, sorry. It's got an N in it, so I don't know. But she's holding him up, and then Stacy Keibler says something along the lines of, "I bet Lita and Trish wish they had legs that go from here all the way up to here." And then Tori slaps Stacy Keibler's ass and says, "Oh, you do have a firm ass," or something along those lines.
Basically, yeah.
It is pretty insane how much just things have changed even on our timeline. This wasn't that long ago. And if you try to do something like this now, like this is basically softcore porn on WWF television.
Their cadence and delivery of their words is out of a porno.
Legit out of a porno.
Legit. Yep.
My voluptuous breasts, and she's rubbing her boobs together.
Yeah, it was literally straight out of a porno.
I couldn't help but just laugh. I couldn't believe this. It's like, wow, you kind of forget this kind of thing happened on the reg back then.
Yeah, I'll probably get heat for this, but it was interesting. Like, it was a fun segment, and it was because you can't. I was just looking at it, just being like, I'm interested, I'm intrigued, because I just know that you just can't. This is a relic.
it's going to elicit a reaction either way.
It's
isn't it?
fascinating, yeah, one way or the other. Like whatever you say, it was interesting. Just because it's just a time capsule moment, you won't get this again. I outside of that, yeah, I mean, it was shameful, right? But fascinating and like entertaining. And honestly, that's almost a spoiler for my thoughts of the match that's going to come up later with them. It's I wouldn't go as far as to say it's car crash like how you described some of the ECW antics. We're talking about violence though, that you mentioned last week. It's not that egregious for me. It's just certainly, how do we put this? Because we know if it still happened to this day, it would be boring already. Like regardless of like politics and all that, or how the temperature of the room has changed since then. Like if they just still did this stuff, it would be boring now. They're not doing this stuff now, which is fine. So actually going back to it is kind of refreshing, at least for me. And I know I'm going to get heat for that, but I'm just going to go ahead and say it because I'm just like, I was actually not used to it. I forgot what it was like. And just the absence of it now was more jarring watching it there and then. I feel more that way about the backstage part. The Brand Panties match is like a little bit worse, whereas it's just words and it's just silliness in the backstage package. So actually, I kind of enjoy it. Does that make sense?
But what was weird about it is that they weren't doing it silly. They weren't being like, "Oh, look at my boobs! Oh, look at your ass!" Ha ha ha! It was like they were talking to each other like they're about to do a scene together.
Like they're about to make out.
Movie. Yeah. That's why it was weird.
Yeah, I guess so. It was like a weird, not like a dream, as in, oh, I mean, I'm sure it's a lot of people's dream, but yeah, the delivery and like, why would they think people just act like that backstage? Like, because your big thing is this kind of phantom camera, right?
Yes. Yeah.
And it's just catching a segment that wouldn't happen. And that's what they capture. So that's like WWE back at the time thought that's how people, like women, act to each other when no one's watching. And they're just like slapping each other's butts. And
people
I feel
don't.
Like it's more like men would be doing that backstage, would be slapping each other's butts, right?
People don't talk like this in real life whatsoever.
At all, yeah.
But
yeah.
I'm glad.
Oddly fascinating, though.
It is. Well, I'm glad you found it fascinating and thoroughly entertaining. Because the next match, it was anything but. The next match, Raven representing ECW defeats William Regal representing the WWF in, I couldn't believe this, 6 minutes and 35 seconds. This felt way longer than 6 minutes and 35 seconds. There's some wrestlers, we kind of spoke about this before. It's kind of why I wanted to do Invasion this week. Because last week we did ECW and we spoke about the wrestlers that just did not resonate or work in the WWF. And when they didn't have that Paul Heyman safety net and booking behind them, they just had almost nothing, it seems. For whatever reason, Raven just seemed to have nothing in the WWF. And people say they should have pushed him more and everything else. It's like, well, gave him like a near 7-minute match here.
Mm-hmm.
He doesn't really show anything. There's no heat and there's no... I mean, I guess you could blame it on the booking, blame it on the storylines, but this match with William Regal here, I just did not find it too entertaining. And I remember at the time being mad because I was a fan of WCW, a fan of ECW. Raven had also been in WCW and had a relatively good run. He was a main eventer in ECW, and I was mad that Raven was not a bigger deal in the WWF. When he debuted joining with Taz and beat up Jerry the King Lawler, I was like already just like, oh, he's going to be a low card guy. He didn't come in and beat up The Rock or Stone Cold Steve Austin.
Mm-hmm.
And I think the thing is that like Vince McMahon seems to have no, what's the word I'm looking for? Preconceived notions. Is that the correct term?
Right? The way you've said it is correct. Yeah.
That's what I'm asking. He has no preconceived notions of any of these guys. So like, Vince McMahon has never seen any wrestling that's not WWF. He does not watch anything else. So he wouldn't have seen Raven in ECW. He wouldn't have seen Taz in ECW.
The idea that he's just bought this stuff sight unseen.
Well, yeah, people recommend it's like, okay. People say we should bring him in. Okay. The
Yeah, when
first
they
time,
say we love DDP, he's somehow not okay.
right, but the first time he sees them is on his TV show. So like, if they don't impress from the get go,
That's it.
that's them dead in the water, really. And
Yeah.
this must have happened to Raven, but like, without all the bravado, without the booking, him just as he is, Vince saw and didn't see anything in him. And honestly, I'm a fan of Raven, but this match in particular, or the way he was presented here, and to be honest with you, pretty much his whole entire WWF run, very underwhelming. And at the same time, this, like I said, this match, it dragged, it was boring, the crowd was dead. I People like the fans on the net really romanticize William Regal. I'm not taking anything away from him. He's obviously a great performer. But I don't know if these matches in the WWF that Regal had were his strong point. I think his strong point was more his backstage stuff and pretty much doing the comedy stuff. But when I hear these fans on the internet or whatever it is, but that sounds so it sounds so old, saying, oh, on the internet. But okay, just fans in general saying like, oh, William Regal should have been world champion or whatever it was. I think, really? Here, 2001, Regal's in the company and he's in there. There's The Rock and there's Stone Cold and Triple H and all these guys. And you think Regal should have been world champion? Like, come on,
That's a little too far. I
Right.
really, really like William Regal. In fact, this is what's so annoying about this match is I like both guys. So it being so, William Regal would like your mug.
Oh yeah, I bought this just for this match.
There we go. Yeah, I like both guys, which makes it even more annoying, just how flat it was. And you're right, the crowd seemed disinterested. So that lack of energy made me disinterested. I also feel like Raven and William Regal, bit of a spoiler for a match coming up later. There's a match coming up later where it's RVD and Jeff Hardy, where I just feel like they just have an instant chemistry in the way they work. Whereas I feel like Raven and William Regal just didn't have any kind of like bond in the way they performed. You would understand more what I mean. I may be getting it wrong, but I just feel like, do you ever wrestle someone and it's just like a dud? There's nothing wrong with them. There's nothing wrong with you.
Yeah.
You just don't pair. You just
It's
don't
called-
gel.
It's called you don't gel. It's called like a styles clash, really. And this is a big time styles
I
clash.
feel like this is a huge example of that. William Regal, though, I really, really enjoy, but I wouldn't say that he should have been world champion. That's insane. I actually think he's was exactly where he should have been.
Yeah, he seemed
These
to fill a role.
backstage segments, yes, precisely. Yeah, they were really fun, really funny. In the ring, I also enjoyed him. I don't know not necessarily his technique, but actually, there's a part of this where he goes for a pin. He gets a 2 count. Anyone else would like get up and try and do something else. He just goes for the pin again, and it's still a 2 count. So then he goes for a pin again, and it gets annoying.
Mhm.
And that's a good character bit. I feel like he's a very annoying guy. And there was another bit where he comes in, he dusts off his boots before he gets in the ring.
Yeah.
And they cut to Raven. Raven's just rolling his eyes. I love little moments like that, which I feel like Regal in particular excels at. These tiny little bits of comedy that you just pick up on.
Nuances.
So no, he wasn't a world champion material, but he was fantastic in what he does.
I think his best role was just as the commissioner, to be honest with you.
Yeah.
Or commissioner, or the comedy stuff he did with Tajiri. I don't know. Like, I think, like you said, you're a big fan of William Regal. Let me ask you this: what was your favorite William Regal match?
I don't know. It's the backstage. It's when Chris Jericho peed in his tea.
Right, but you said that you were a fan of his in-ring work.
Oh, I mean his style. Like I said, when he just like repeatedly goes for a pin to the point it gets frustrating to watch. Like, I like that kind of style of like he has a style of wrestling that's unique, like that correlates very closely to his character.
Yes,
it's like character wrestling, which actually you do, so you know what I mean. Like I really enjoy that, and he's a great example of that.
Somebody's got to win a match that way someday. Just keep pinning him, and they keep kicking out. Just keep covering until they get blown up, and it's 1, 2, 3. Someone's got to do that. That would have made this match more entertaining. I was not into this. Yeah,
like I said, I think the crowd picked up on their lack of ability to bond, and it was flat. I
just don't think people cared about Raven and Regal. No. Regal was supposed to be the babyface here, and obviously he's typically a heel. And
kind of enjoy face Regal. I feel like I might be the minority there.
I don't think he really particularly enjoyed being a babyface. I think he's obviously tailor made to be a heel. But yeah, it's just so bizarre. Sometimes I think I remember being a fan of Raven as young,
Mm.
but the more I've seen him as I got older, I've been like, am I missing something with Raven?
So
Like,
I think his look appeals to our child brains. I'm not trying to be disrespectful. Like when you're growing up, he just looks like the coolest guy on the planet.
He was very much
And
someone of the times, maybe, because he had that whole grunge.
yeah,
Nirvana,
and I feel like that carried him a lot
and
because
maybe
we were listening to that music around the time.
And maybe it doesn't hold up so well now when you watch it back. Maybe
I agree. I still like him a lot, but I don't know why I was so captivated. And I think he was the right looking guy at the time where we were already in that kind of zone or scene.
You can tell,
like our guy, but
right? You can tell, like looking at the main event of the WWF scene with, like I said, Triple H, Jericho, Rock, Angle, Austin. You watch Raven here, you can tell why he wasn't a top guy in the WWF, right? Compared to them, it's just, I think it's more than fair. So we see Undertaker and Kane backstage with Vince McMahon. They're getting ready for the inaugural brawl. Am I saying that right?
Inaugural
brawl. When Vince McMahon enters the locker room and says that after losing 2 matches in a row, the WWF couldn't afford to lose any more, especially the inaugural brawl. This is going to be a theme of the show because I've got to say this word a whole bunch of times and I can't seem to do it properly. But the Undertaker promises that they will see the best of the Undertaker tonight, and I tend to disagree. Next matchup, so we just had a stinker in Raven versus William Regal. We now essentially get a Sunday Night Heat match where we see Kanyon, Hugh Morris, and Sean Stasiak representing WCW defeat the Big Show, Billy Gunn, and Albert representing the WWF in 4 minutes and 20 seconds. I don't know why this was on the card. Can somebody tell me why this was even on the card?
I don't even have any notes for it. I'm looking at them now. I've just got the word canyon, which I believe was for me to signify like what match it was. I couldn't even be bothered to write that. And I've got atrocious finish. But you said it was 4 minutes 13. Like, thank goodness it didn't. Like, at least it was under 5 minutes. That's all I can say.
I just wonder if they had 9 matches and then they needed to have 10 or because they had the pre-show match, or 11 matches, they needed like a odd number so
they could do like 5 versus 5 and then have like a decider. Yeah,
right. But I just wondered why. I mean, just to get some more guys on the card, I guess. But I mean, this was when Billy Gunn, we talked about the fans turning on X-Pac earlier for being stale. Funny enough, Billy Gunn still gets a big reaction here, but at this point he was the one Billy Gunn and he seemed very stale, and it just seemed like whatever Billy Gunn did, he just couldn't escape the Mr. Ass gimmick. He could never move on from it. I think we spoke about this in episode 1 with Val Venus. Could never move on from the Val Venus gimmick, the porn star. Billy Gunn's kind of the same. Big Show doesn't look too great here. And I forgot this. Albert, I think, is the Intercontinental Champion here.
Yes, he was. Yeah.
Which I completely forgot about. The fact that Albert, he had everything going for him. He was big. He looked different. He was athletic. He was like Undertaker's mate. He probably should have been a really big star, but somehow never could seem to push past that mid card. But yeah, Sean Stasiak here. Apparently, I don't know how true this is, but I've heard this so many times. At WrestleMania, when the Undertaker, no, what am I talking about? At WrestleMania, when Shane McMahon wrestled Vince McMahon, the plan originally was to have the WCW wrestlers run in and help Shane win the match. But apparently, Sean Stasiak told like the media, or said in an interview, like, "Oh, we're doing a run-in tomorrow on the McMahon match." So on the day they scrapped the run-ins or whatever, and then throughout his whole WWF run, Sean Stasiak, well, the shortness of it, he was kind of, his whole gimmick was kind of like like dumb klutz kind of moron type
Spoiler
gimmick.
moron guy. Yeah.
Yeah, and obviously we spoke about him before on the podcast because he originally got fired from the WWF for recording guys backstage
Yes.
without their knowledge. So his whole WWF run, yeah, it was kind of a bit of a disaster, a bit of a snake bit run. We then see Shane and Booker T backstage. Shane psyched up Booker T, and basically now they tell us in the show that WCW and ECW are 4-3 up because Chavo had beat Scotty 2 Hotty on Sunday Night Heat. So, don't really know how I feel about that. We then see William Regal with Tajiri. Tajiri is sulking, but Regal told Tajiri that tonight is Tajiri's shot. Tajiri has to win for the World Wrestling Federation, which leads into Tajiri representing the WWF, defeating Taz representing ECW in 5 minutes and 30 seconds. It's kind of funny how a lot of the WWF guys that used to work for ECW, they made them join the ECW group, but Tajiri, they just kept on the WWF side. And this is why I said they, like, because they obviously felt like they didn't want to turn Tajiri heel. And this is why I don't think it should have been done where one organization is heels and one organization is faces. I just don't think that worked because the alliance needed some star power. And I get Tajiri is not a main eventer, but he's a bloody amazing wrestler and a good character. They probably could have used someone like Tajiri.
Yeah. Oh yeah, definitely. Do you think the WWF writers of Vince McMahon think that the wrestling audience are dumber than they are and they have to just rely on this black and white level of storytelling, when I feel like they would have been able to handle the complexity of, multiple allegiances within the alliance and this, and some are bad guys, some are good guys, but they have a common cause, and I feel like they would have been able to handle that, and I just feel like maybe they took the audience either for stupid or for granted.
Yeah, well, I felt like if they had it the way I'm suggesting, the focal point could have been more about the stars themselves and less about I want my organization to win. Like, to me, DDP should just kind of want to win himself. And I guess he would like WCW to win as well. But I feel like it didn't necessarily need to be this full on, I don't know, the story.
Us versus them.
Right. I think it would have been cooler just, there's these big WCW stars turning up now to wrestle the WWF stars that we'd never seen before. So we get the story of, like, Sting versus Undertaker is a story within itself. Goldberg versus Steve Austin, a story within itself. It didn't need to be, like, the focal point didn't need to be, we're fighting for Vince and we're fighting for Shane, if that makes sense.
Yeah, and they led with this kind of wartime imagery. I can't actually remember what it was, but at the package right at the start, it was like a legit invasion. Mm-hmm. So it's like, we're calling it Invasion, so it's got to be like we're being invaded. So it is them versus us. But they could have just called the pay-per-view something else or the angle something else, and just had. Actually, no, it would still be an invasion. I mean, it? Even if they've got their own separate, I guess, motivations. So they wouldn't even have to change anything.
It seems like the pay-per-view should. I think the best way to sell it would have just been to call it WWF versus WCW. Like the WWF versus WCW showdown or whatever it is, rather than this kind of weird, like, because there's been loads of invasion angles before. Obviously, the NWO was an invasion angle, and it's almost like the WCW and ECW here, they're more of a faction than a wrestling organization, if that makes sense.
Yeah.
They're bringing it in as a faction, where it's like they should
a massive stable,
right. They should just be a wrestling organization. Do you know what I'm saying? That's why I'm saying I don't think they all have to be heels or they all have to be heels or faces. They could just be a mixture. But either way, they I guess they didn't. I don't know if Tajiri, if he ever joined the alliance further down the line. I don't think he did. I think he stayed as a babyface this whole entire time. I have a theory that when Taz puts this particular outfit on, the jumpsuit, the jogging bottoms and the ripped shirt or whatever, that he like lost all his powers, it seemed. He lost all his human suplex powers and abilities. We talked about Raven just a minute ago, just not working in the WWF. Taz, kind of same deal, just did not.
Well, he came in hard.
came in very hot, but it lasted about 3 weeks, and then
Yeah,
but he came in wearing the singlet. He wore the leotard that he'd always worn in
he did.
ECW. Then after a few months, I get the feeling because here Taz is looking pretty heavy. He
Hmm.
looks like he's put on quite a bit of weight, not looking in nowhere near as good shape as he was. So he
No,
moved into this like tracksuit that he wrestled in, and
he looks like a bad mechanic.
he does, and it's not flattering. And I feel like he's already a short guy. I feel like it makes him look shorter.
Yeah, big
I-
baggy pants. The thing that
Yeah.
makes him look like a mechanic. Like I said, we like a brawler.
Mhm.
I feel like we've always said that. Maybe we haven't, but we like a brawler. That's kind of his thing. He was less of a scary judo master. In this one, he was just a bit of a brawler. I felt like he was kind of sloppy though in this, at least. And like you said, he didn't look his best. He lost all of his powers. Looks like a bad mechanic. Tajiri though, so I like Taz, but I kind of lost it at this around this time. I was getting up. I was done with Taz. Tajiri though, still love him. Always loved him. He's awesome.
Yeah, like it's funny because Taz, I've kind of said this before, when when he had he in in ECW, he came across like a superstar.
Hmm.
And he didn't really have to sell much. He was protected by Paul Heyman's booking, and Heyman booked him strong and basically booked him just to suplex people out of their boots and kick their ass. And he did that well. He did that great. When it came to the WWF, you have to have more depth than that, I think, or Vince expects more depth. They want you to sell. They want you to do this. They want you to do whatever else. Be more dynamic, cut promos, everything. Be able to do comedy, be able to make them laugh, make them cry. It just seemed that Taz here, like, again, when he got out of, like, he's already short. He's not in the best shape. So they changed his gear to this, or he changed the gear to this. Again, here, you couldn't see him going toe to toe with Stone Cold Steve Austin, or
Not at all.
even like a guy that wasn't at the top, like Jericho or whatnot. You just can't see it. So I think it's one of those things where fans say, "Oh, WWF screwed up Taz." I'm like, did they though? Did they
Did he do
really?
it to himself?
Right. And I don't know. I mean, I don't know what his thoughts are. Maybe he thinks they screwed him around. I mean, they kept him employed for a long time, so they probably liked him. But I don't think here, I don't think when he came to the WWF, he really rose to the occasion. But someone who did, I think Tajiri is one of my favorite wrestlers. I absolutely love Tajiri. And again, there was a few guys from ECW that could really rise from the pack. And it's like guys like Just Incredible, Raven, Taz did not work. Even Jerry Lynn did not work. But your Van Dam, you're a Rhino to an extent. And I would definitely say Tajiri. I think Tajiri was an overachiever in the WWF, if anything, considering his size and being a cruiserweight. He did really, really well because he could adapt to the WWF style. He didn't really speak English, but he still had this charisma and he could carry these backstage segments.
Yes, yeah.
Really I think Tajiri really was a shining light in this show, actually. He was one of the highlights of the show.
Definitely. This is another, maybe we can scrape out a Tajiri appreciation
we should.
Out of this because he's our guy, man. He's our man. Going back to the match, those kicks that he delivered to Taz's chest sounded absolutely brutal. I think they were worth it totally, just for the setup to Taz's famous like capture suplex. I don't know what it's called, where he catches the leg and head suplex, which is always incredible. And it was just like taking those kicks and then grabbing the last one, and that was a good little spot. I really enjoyed that. I didn't think the green mist was going to come out, and it comes out of nowhere.
Dude, it's so funny you say that because I 100% knew the green mist was coming out.
Did you?
I was watching, and all of a sudden, he's doing kicks to Jerry, and his mouth's just shut the whole time. Like,
oh, okay.
I'm not sitting there watching. Go, oh, he's about to do the green.
You know,
mist.
It's going to do. Ah, okay.
If you watch it back, and you know that now, watch it because his whole face is just like completely still, and his mouth is shut. He's like, and he's doing the kicks, and then like, oh, it's got to come in a second. And sure enough, he spits out the green mist. So yeah, it was. I don't know why, but
I'll look out for it. But
I noticed it watching it. It was kind of funny, actually.
I wasn't looking for it. I was just like, oh, okay, well, it's not happening. So for me, it came out of nowhere. I love the green mist. I always love it. Always,
How good
I
is the green mist?
It's
Is such
so
a good
good.
gimmick. It's such a
It's
good
so
gimmick.
good.
I love the green mist as a spot. I don't know why. You think about it, it's actually kind of ridiculous, but for whatever reason,
No, you don't know what it is. It could be that it's poison, dude.
Right.
It's not food coloring. It's poison.
Yeah.
Did he invent that, or is that an old Japanese trope?
He would have got it from the Great Muta, who would have got it from the Great Kabuki. Is it from thing from Japan? I think the Great Kabuki was the first guy to do it, but there was probably a guy before that. But yeah, from Japan, yeah.
Mate, I love it. I love it so much. And you know, it's time for my segment where I turn it back around to video games. But Armor King in Tekken 7 does the green mist.
Oh, does he? I didn't know that.
Yeah, he does. And also, his fantastic looking pants have some Hayabusa vibes. Maybe I'm wrong.
Oh, really? Okay. Yeah, I can see that.
But yeah, the green mist always. Yeah, you're right. It's so good. It's so good. I just love it. I can't stop thinking about it. I feel like I need to do it day to day. I'm going to have it ready.
Well, I think Oscar in the WWE does it now.
Yes. Yeah, I think so.
But to me, it doesn't have the same effect as when Tajiri did it.
No way.
I feel like lots of people have tried to replicate it, and it just doesn't have the same effect. I think Tajiri was one of the best ones to do the mist.
Well, I've only seen him at that point. I've seen people do it forward, but I haven't seen people do it back. But yeah, I absolutely love it. I feel like I want to steal it for my everyday life. So if I get pulled over, or if I'm trying to get a refund and they say no, what do you reckon?
You'd be doing that every day.
Every day, especially
here.
You'd
be spinning a lot of mist. I tell you what else you don't want to do, and that is wear a WCW t-shirt around Hardcore Holly.
No, he'll, even if you're a kid, he'll just rip it off your chest.
So we get to the point of the show where we have to take it over to WWF New York. Who is signing at WWF New York, or who is the guest? Who's not on the pay-per-view, basically? Who's not getting the pay-per-view payday? None other than Sparky Plug. Bob Hardcore Holly is there. And we see, which is very obviously set up segment of Hardcore Holly signing autographs. A kid comes up, or a young adult. He's wearing a black WCW t-shirt. Hardcore Holly stands up. And what does he say? He says, "This is not WCW New York. This is WWF New York." And he rips off the fan's shirt and he throws it at him. And the fan runs off crying as all the fans cheer yeah, yeah, yeah. So Hardcore Holly just being a bully to a fan. But I don't really understand. I guess they're trying to get over the whole, there's so much tension between WWF and WCW.
I just read it as Vince says, if you like WCW, you're scum. Basically. That's how it reads, right? There's no other way to read it.
It's very kind of bizarre. There's a few bizarre segments in this show, including that Tori Wilson grabbing her breast earlier. But I was laughing at this for quite a long time. Just the idea that Hardcore Holly is this unhinged maniac that, would assault people.
So
they're wearing a WCW t-shirt.
That's why I need the green mist. What if I wear my WCW t-shirt and I see Hardcore Holly?
You run into Bob Holly. Yeah,
and he's going to try and rip my shirt off. I have to protect myself.
You've got to be prepared. My question to you, though, Sam, were you prepared for this? Because the next match, arguably,
I wasn't prepared for how good it was.
Probably not arguably, just without doubt, the match of the night.
The match of the show, yeah.
It's a Hardcore Championship match. It's Rob Van Dam representing ECW wins the Hardcore Championship, defeating Jeff Hardy, who's representing the WWF, in 12 minutes and 40 seconds. I think when people think back to this show, Invasion, this is the match that stands out. This was an incredible, really, really fun and great match. And I think what is so crazy about this match is this was Van Dam's, or RVD's, WWF debut. And before this, he wasn't in WCW. He was only in ECW. And the perception is, no one watched ECW. But all the fans here seem to know who Rob Van Dam is. He is over as Rover.
Super Oh yeah.
super over. People don't give Van Damme that enough credit for just how
much he resonates with the
over,
audience.
yeah, how over he got. Because,
Mhm.
like I said, he'd only been in ECW before this. He's in there with Jeff Hardy, who's arguably one of the most
Another one.
popular
Yeah.
WWF guys, and Rob Van Dam's like more over than him, and this is his WWF debut. But yeah, here they really let Van Dam and Jeff Hardy just do their thing, and I think that was a big fear of fans that if Rob Van Dam came to the WWE, then he wouldn't be able to do the stuff that he was doing in ECW. But they kind of took the handcuffs off and let Van Dam do his thing for whatever reason.
Mhm.
It's strange because a lot of the wrestlers, they couldn't do what they did in ECW. We just spoke about that with Taz
Yeah.
and Raven. But for
Yeah.
Van Dam, they just, for whatever reason, they're like,
Had
okay,
faith in him. Yeah.
go do your thing.
And he delivered.
He did. And
This is an amazing match.
it's funny because I remember when they had brought him in and had him fighting for the Hardcore Championship, I was almost a little disappointed at the time because I thought, oh, damn, no pun intended, but the Hardcore division has kind of been like the lowest of the card. And I saw Van Dam as a top guy. So I thought when they brought him in, he was fighting for the Hardcore title. He was going to be a low card guy. But actually, Van Dam like elevated that title and he still had that title and got kind of pushed to the main event to the point where I remember Van Dam was wrestling The Undertaker for the Hardcore Championship on a pay-per-view like not too long after this.
I was going to say, wasn't the Hardcore title a thing after this? Maybe because of him. I felt like it was kind of a hot item. Hardcore Championship.
And I would never say it was a hot item. I think Van Dam was always big in the title. I'd say the height of it was probably when Crash Holly was doing the 24/7 stuff.
we got to do that.
But most of the time, it was kind of a bit of a joke and kind of it was a bottom.
Well,
of
that
the
was
card
only the year
championship.
before, wasn't it? So I feel like it was kind of hot around that time. Still, no.
It was a bottom of the card. It was the rankings was like world title, Intercontinental title, European title, Hardcore title. Like everyone could win the Hardcore title. Like I think Mae Young was Hardcore champion. Like, or the security guard was Hardcore champion. It was a joke championship belt. You know, it didn't have any prestige to it. Right, it was fun. I'm not saying that. I'm saying it was a bottom of the card belt. But Van Dam, that's what I'm saying. I was worried that they were going to treat him or see him as a bottom of the card guy. But in fact, what he did, he kind of elevated it and kind of brought it up with him. So, yeah, this was the highlight of the night. What do you think?
Oh, absolutely. There was a good, short and sweet element of the in-crowd brawling, which we like. And you said last week you enjoyed the one with Taz and Bam Bam Bigelow, some of the out in the crowd stuff, but we kind of agreed that it didn't really have anywhere to go. Whereas these two guys, they got in the crowd, do the spots, get back out. It was just they used everything that they had. Oh, we should note, I don't think they, despite it being for a hardcore championship, said at any point this was a hardcore match. They just said it was like a Falls Count Anywhere or no rules or something like that. But maybe I'm wrong.
Well, hardcore title is always going to be a hardcore match.
Yes. But I mean, yeah, but they just called it a Falls Count Anywhere, I believe. Maybe I'm wrong.
No, I don't think they called it a Falls Count Anywhere. I think they were saying that Falls Count Anywhere.
Oh, okay.
It's a hardcore match, so it's applied under hardcore rules, you know?
But they used that Falls Count Anywhere fully. They went up to the ramp. They did a good spot there. There was this part where RVD's on his knees begging not to be hit with the chair. Jeff Hardy goes to hit him with the chair, and Van Dam comes in and obviously does the kick and does like an impromptu. Is that the Van Daminator?
The Van Daminator. They timed it absolutely perfect.
Yeah, the timing. This is my note. The timing of that. When you see it back, Van Dam has about 1 second to get off of his knees and get in his spin. And they both timed it so well. And then Jeff Hardy sold it. He goes flying off of the ramp like it's one of those stage fatalities in Mortal Kombat where you uppercut them and they fall off the pit. He just goes flying onto the concrete down below, which must have been a hell of a bump. It was so good. It was by the way, we should notice that this was a very non-gratuitous hardcore match, which I appreciate nowadays. You know, back then I'd probably be like, I want blood and guts. But this was a very tastefully done one.
The Van Daminator, so the this was timed so well because it literally just looked like Jeff was swinging the chair like he would a baseball bat, and Van Dam comes up and hits a spin kick.
Yeah.
Whereas a lot of the times with this, where you see people do the Van Daminator, or even Van Dam himself, the guys just normally stood there just holding the chair in front of their face, like waiting for it. Or Van Dam would throw the chair, they would catch it in front of their face, and then Van Dam would jump up and do the spin kick. But this was just timed so
Came
well.
out of nowhere.
Yeah, Jeff swinging the steel chair, and as he's swinging it, Van Dam just comes up and boots it straight back into his face. It was really tremendous.
We've got to stress, he wasn't like, Jeff Hardy wasn't winding it up and telegraphing it and holding it back, and then no, he just went to go for it, and before you know it, Van Daminator, and he's off the ramp. That was like, I know it's only a little thing maybe, but that I feel like specifically was the highlight of the pay-per-view. That one particular thing.
No, it's probably the thing I remember most from this. One thing I completely forgot in this match. At one point, Jeff Hardy just randomly pulls out this ridiculously tall ladder. It's ridiculously tall, sets it up on the floor, climbs to the top, and then this is like a very, very underrated and scary bump that no one ever talks about. It's never re-shown in video packages or anything else. He climbs to the top of it on the outside, and then Van Dam just comes as Jeff stood on top of it and kind of slowly pushes it over, where Jeff just basically slowly comes down and like rides it and crashes down to the floor. Kind of still lands maybe on his feet and rolls, but it's so damn high. Like, it gave me anxiety watching it. Like, I'm not a big fan of heights.
I can't believe
I was
his
like,
holy didn't blow out,
dude. I was like, that was so high. That was so, like, I would much rather just jump off a ladder and go for a table. That would be fine. Standing on top of the ladder and having it slowly pushed off, where you, like you said, you ride it down with it, is because you're traveling pretty far as well, because you're up in the air. If the ladder is 20 foot, you're ending up 20 foot over there. Like,
gaining momentum,
right?
Like the entire, like, you have more momentum the higher the ladder is. It was the highest ladder you've seen of all time. It was like 5 of Spike Dudley's ladders from last week stacked together. Right. It was insane. But
that one, you never see that replayed or anything. But to me, like I said, I would much rather do a swanton jumping off a ladder through a table or got something to almost cushion my blow than what he did. That was so, and that could have gone so wrong. He was really fortunate. Good Lord. I don't know how he didn't die, or like you said, broke his leg on that one. It was insane.
When we talked about Rico being probably just feeling like something lasted for 2 minutes, when it was probably 10 seconds when he was waiting for Jeff to knock him off the turnbuckle, way back when in one of our early episodes, imagine how long that must have felt for Jeff. That slow descent.
Right.
Yeah. Oh my God. It was
just
probably
being in that big arena.
It was quite long. It was like a 3 or 4 second.
Yeah. It was
insane. It was. Oh my God. Yeah, that was. I'm glad you brought that up, because for some reason, yeah, you're right. Like, why is it so? I would have not brought it up if you didn't, despite the fact that I was flabbergasted at it. I was like, just the amount of time you have to watch it just builds up the suspense as well.
It does.
Oh, and we should note that Van Dam's like, he doesn't just slow push it. He's like really selling it, like, and they're rocking, and then he starts to get more of a rock.
At first, he's like rocking it, where it almost feels like that Jeff's actually just going to fall directly down on it. Yes. Like, he almost loses himself off it. It was really quite bizarre. But this was a star-making performance for Van Dam. He was pretty much the only person. Well, himself and Booker T are the only people that came out of this whole alliance and invasion thing, like, came out of it well and looking good. Everyone else, not so much. But yeah, he was definitely a shining star amongst everyone else.
For sure.
Van Dam.
Yeah. I mentioned it when we talked about Regal, but this match with Raven Regal, they didn't really have a chemistry. I feel like RVD and Jeff Hardy just gelled incredibly well together. Maybe it's because they have similar styles. They know how to be and take high-flying maneuvers and high-risk maneuvers, but their chemistry was it was great to watch. Really good. There was, like I said, it was non-gratuitous hardcore match. Great crowd brawling. Crowd loved it. We've got 2 people who know. I don't think Jeff Hardy's the greatest wrestler ever, but he gives the people what they want, and he just, when he gets up on that turnbuckle at the end to do the Swanton Bomb, he hasn't even done it yet. The crowd just get off their feet. They're going nuts. There was just pops galore. It was, this match was, it was excellent. It was so good.
Yeah.
I was really happy to watch it. And honestly, this match is enough to basically elevate the entire pay-per-view, my final rating, just by itself.
It's salvaged. It's salvaged.
Yes, perfect word. Yeah.
The pay-per-view, and it was a star-making performance for
RVD. Yeah, knocked out of the park. He came
knocked it out of the
swinging,
park.
Yeah.
So next we see Vince McMahon and Kurt Angle backstage. Basically just Vince just getting Kurt ready for this inaugural brawl tonight, which leads us to our next match. We just saw Van Dam and Jeff Hardy just completely tear the house down.
How can we top that?
How can we top that? We're going to see the women tear their clothes off because it's a bra and panties match. Trish and Lita Trish and Lita representing the WWF defeat Tori and Stacy representing WCW in 5 minutes and 3 seconds by, I guess, stripping them into their bra and panties. It is worth noting that Mick Foley's music hits again because he's going to be the special guest referee once again, with the joke being, well, if you want me to be the referee for the referees match, like the one condition is I have to be the referee for the bra and panties match.
I thought it was, I did kind of find that kind of
funny. Yeah, it was
like,
kind of funny.
I'm already dressed for it.
Yeah,
you know,
it was, I guess it kind of was funny. And I guess they just needed someone in there to help. I guess the thing because I wondered, I was like, why did they not just have a proper women's match? And then I remembered that Tori
how
Wilson,
green those two were.
Well, they weren't green. They weren't even wrestlers in WCW. Tori and Stacy were just both
valets.
Valets, right? And then when WWF bought WCW, they started WWF were like, we kind of need you to wrestle as well. So they trained them like a little bit. So this was probably one of their first ever matches, and they probably just had some training leading up to this just to be able to get them through a bra and panties match. But yeah, they weren't even wrestlers. So, and Stacy never really wrestled much in a WWE career. And Tori, to be honest, you didn't really that much either, more so than Stacy, but she kind of stuck more to being a valet as well. But that's obviously why they had a bra and panties match, because they couldn't just have like a normal wrestling match. It's, again, we spoke about it earlier with the segment. The bra and panties matches now almost seem kind of surreal. Like, you just could not imagine that in this day and age, could you, at all? It just seems like, and it wasn't that long ago, but it seems so ludicrous that like the women can have a match and the aim is to strip each other down. It just seems so odd. And it
does.
It was commonplace back then. Completely
commonplace. It was a feature. It was like a match type in the games.
Right. Yeah. It was a big deal. The bra and panties match. Yeah. It just, but now it just seems so. Even though it happened all the time, I'm sure
it seems like a million years ago.
It seems like just ludicrous. There's nothing.
So there's not really much to say, but they're obviously for beautiful women, right? All four of them, amazing. However, actual in-ring talent and charisma wise, it's a no contest. Like Trish and Lita, I'm surprised they picked two actual decent women's wrestlers to represent, because it just seems so one-sided.
How do you mean?
Well, I think Trish and Lita have buckets of charisma and talent.
So you're saying they deserve better, or?
I'm saying, so if they had to have if they needed someone to bra and panties match with Tori and Stacy, who aren't bags of charisma and talent, charismatic, especially then, and talent, isn't there anyone else on the card for WWF that they could have?
But then the match,
a little more fair.
But then their match would have been even worse.
It's true. Yeah, you're right. Jeez,
they needed good workers in there to kind of carry it, because these girls have no idea what they're doing.
All right, fair enough. Yeah, you're right.
They need someone to carry them through it. The only thing I can say about this match is I understand that Tori and Stacy weren't wrestlers or real wrestlers yet, but their choice of outfits was quite bizarre. Tori is wearing this t-shirt, like a red t-shirt, which I think said cowboy on it. And it just seemed like a cheap, generic t-shirt you would buy from like a H&M or something like that, or a Forever 21. And then Stacy is wearing some kind of red top, and then she's wearing almost what looks like dress pants or something. She looks like she's dressed up as a school teacher or something. It was very bizarre what he decided to wear to wrestling. Did you pick up on that?
I did. I know we're talking about a bra and panties match in 2001, but they also, not only was it odd to look at, but it was strategically terrible for the match type. Just the easiest stuff to rip off.
Right.
Well.
Yeah.
Not that.
Yeah.
Not. I don't know why we're talking strategy when we're talking about a bra and panties match, but I also noticed that it was. Yeah. I mean, I don't really know what else we can say about this.
No. Well, I think we should move on. Well, Sam, we best get ready for the main event. Team Alliance versus Team WWF, the inaugural brawl. But before the bout, we see Shane, Stephanie, and Heyman tell Team WCW ECW that tonight is do or die. And then in another locker room, we see Stone Cold promise Vince McMahon that he would whoop some ass. And that's the bottom line because Stone Cold said so.
We talk about shouty promos from the early 90s, shouty promos where everything is delivered with a real gusto. They brought that back, the Team Alliance, right, in this little clip. They just huddled, screaming, including Stephanie.
There was a lot of these promos at the time where they're trying to fire up team members and
each other. Yes,
the best way is to shout, "We're gonna win! We're gonna win!" WCW. Yeah, it's
So, guys, you may not know this, but we do this before each podcast. About 10 minutes, don't we? Yeah.
You're a lion, Sam. You're a lion.
It's pronounced inaugural. Inaugural.
We have to get Sam out of his shell before every podcast. Normally, Sam is very introvert and won't talk, and then we have to fire him up, and then he's this big ball of fire for the podcast, right, Sam?
Something like that. It does. It starts to wane, and then we pause. We have another shouting match, another shouty huddle, and then we unpause and carry on.
I don't know if people have noticed. I do apologize. I have a bit of a bad throat
Cold
today,
or something,
which is annoying. So next is just before the inaugural brawl is a video package. Actually, a pretty well done video package, but because I've got a terrible throat, Sam, I'm going to ask you to explain this to the audience.
Okay, so Vince McMahon begs Stone Cold Steve Austin to come along, join WWF. It's about, we need this. This is an invasion. And Stone Cold is like, no, sir. And he turns his back and he walks away, like you see in The Incredible Hulk, the original TV show, walking to the sunset, head low, walking back to the entrance ramp. Vince McMahon is just pleading, no, Stone Cold, turn around, turn around. He doesn't do so. Then we cut to Stone Cold Steve Austin drinking alone and at a bar in such a stereotypical way. He looks like a stock photo of depressed guy. He just has this bottle of beer. He's by himself. Vince McMahon walks in. Deborah stops him. He's like, oh, no. Again, nothing's going to shake this man. He's no means no, especially with Stone Cold. You know, he marches to the beat of his own drum. Vince McMahon gets out of there. Nothing's going to change Stone Cold's mind until he looks at the TV, and the TV plays exclusively back in this bar, which may be WWF New York, but plays exclusively backstage footage that is not shown anywhere else of WWF, where we see The Undertaker in a conference room somewhere giving the WWF guys a nice pep talk, which I found interesting because the only guy who's on camera that you can see at the front of the table, at the front of the conference, next to the Undertaker, is Perry Saturn, who to me is a WCW guy if ever there was one. But I guess because he was hired before then, that just instantly makes him WWF guy, and he's like going, "Oh yes, we need to help WWF." And I'm like,
he was also
you're a WCW guy.
He was made in ECW, then he got big push in WCW, and then he was jabroni in WWF. Yet he's like, WWF.
Aligning with W. He's like, yes. I will say that. And but again, not enough. Stone Cold's like, no, he's drinking his beer. He's like, that's not enough. I don't want to join Perry Saturn. So then, what is enough? They wheel out Freddie Blassie, of all people, who then gives another pep talk. If Undertaker is not enough. We'll get out Freddie. Freddie Blassie is like, oh yes, WWE. And that is enough to make Stone Cold Steve Austin change his mind, seeing Freddie Blassie on TV in a sports bar. So then he turns around. I don't understand that. It makes no logical sense, especially when we're talking about Stone Cold Steve Austin. I do like Freddie Blassie, though. Pencil Neck Geek. Do you remember that?
I do,
That's
of
me.
course.
That's me.
He was talking about you.
Yeah, he was. He wrote that about me. So then Stone Cold comes in. He's like, oh, your shoulder. And that's basically it. But I make it sound terrible. And logically, it was terrible. But emotionally, it was kind of, well, this is, we've always said this. WWF do amazing packages, like video reels, and they get you up to speed really well. But they're also not necessarily emotive, but they're kind of tacky in a way, but they work in the moment. You know, if it's designed to get you fired up, you're fired up. If they're designed to make you feel bad for someone, like when the McMahon Helmsley era fired Mick Foley, it makes you feel bad, even though it's all pretty silly stuff. They somehow do a number on you, and I've never really understood how they managed to craft that magic, but they always do. This was no exception.
This was the video where Vince McMahon kept asking, we want the old Stone Cold. We want the old Stone Cold, because...
And I'm like, hey, if you had the old Stone Cold, he'd be kicking your head in, right?
Well, that's true. That's true. But maybe Vince wanted that. And because the whole idea, obviously, Stone Cold was a badass his whole WWF run. Then he turned heel, and now all of a sudden he's an emotional guy that wants hugs from Vince McMahon and everything else. And the audience had been begging for the old Stone Cold to come back. People didn't want to see Stone Cold as a heel. I have a big theory that Stone Cold Steve Austin's heel turn killed the wrestling business, but that's probably a discussion for a whole nother day. In fact, the pilot for Chillin With The Villain, Sam and I discussed this, and maybe one day when we make our Patreon, we'll put that out there for you all to listen to. But he's saying, I want the old Stone Cold Steve Austin. It's exactly what the audience wanted. And what's crazy is that this was like 2 or 3 months into Austin's heel turn or heel run, and it hadn't worked. And this was a perfect opportunity to turn him back babyface, which they do for a second, and then he ends up, I mean, I'm getting too far ahead, but I'm not spoiling it for anyone. Yeah. He ends up turning on Team WF in the match later. It was like, this was your perfect opportunity to turn him babyface again. Like, the heel turn had not worked. People did not want to see Steve Austin as a heel. It hurt the business. It made wrestling look phony, because people thought, okay, I know wrestling's a work, but Stone Cold is real. He's Cold, legit. I can relate to. He's legit. So then when he turned heel and joined Vince McMahon, it's the equivalent, I think, of Disney being like, everyone, Mickey Mouse is a bad guy now. Mickey Mouse is a villain. Everyone would just be like, they've jumped the shark. This is ridiculous. It just hurt the business. But more so in how it relates to this pay-per-view, don't you think it's really funny, or just sums up this whole pay-per-view, that the build-up video for the main event of WWF versus WCW is basically just a video about Vince McMahon asking for the old Stone Cold? This has got nothing to do with WWF and WCW and their rivalry. No, yeah. Think about the video packages they could have made of just years of footage of WWF and WCW and the stories and the talking heads. The world collides. Right, the talking heads they could have had, and their headlines coming up, and they could have come up with all like the old magazines of like the from back in the day when it was like the years dream matches of WWF and WCW, and like clips of WCW beating WWF's ass and the ratings, and clips of like Hogan leaving WWF going to WCW, all this great amazing
Monday
stuff.
Night Wars,
all the wars, like all the shots that WCW took at WWF, and then vice versa. They
arriving in
so
the tank,
much, all that stuff, all of it. Bischoff challenging Vince to a match on pay-per-view, and all this stuff, or Bischoff giving away the WWF results on Nitro.
I love that, by the way.
All this stuff, and instead we get a video of Vince McMahon asking for the old Stone Cold Steve Austin back. Just nothing to do with like that's pretty insane when you think about it. How just what a missed opportunity.
Missed opportunity. There it is again. Yeah. How do you sum up a missed opportunity more than just throwing that out? Yeah.
But
bummer.
So I guess we best get to it.
We should probably get to.
So Team WCW /ECW. Booker T, the Dudley Boys, Diamond Dallas Page and Rhino, with Shane, Stephanie, and Paul Heyman, defeat Chris Jericho, Kane, Kurt Angle, Stone Cold Steve Austin, and The Undertaker with Vince McMahon in 29 minutes and 5 seconds, when Stone Cold Steve Austin turns heel and joins the Alliance. The first thing I've got to say about this, so this just didn't feel right, because Team Alliance or Team WCW, ECW, it's only got 2 new members, as in Booker T and Diamond Dallas Page. The Dudley Boys and Rhino had both worked for WWF. The Dudley Boys since '99, and Rhino, I want to say, since he hadn't been there that long, but he'd still been there for maybe 3 or 4 months by this point in the WWF. And now they've like turned heel and joined the Alliance. So it didn't really feel like we were getting something new or really getting a real invasion. Yeah. And I was trying to think of, with the guys that they had, how they could have made this better. And I was trying to think like how they could have done it where they just had new guys, but I don't know. The only thing I can come up with, there's such a lack of star power on the WCW side. They could have maybe done it where, so you put RVD in the match, okay? I mean, obviously it would have meant taking him out of the great match Jeff Hardy, but I'm just saying, just try and actually make this match where it's like actually new guys, or actually guys competing. DDP, Booker T, they're cool. Van Dam, then I'm like, who could the other guys be? The only thing I think of is they had Buff Bagwell for like a week when he had that match with Booker T, and then they basically got rid of Buff Bagwell after that, what they considered terrible match. If they could have just kept on to him for at least a few more weeks or a month to have him in this match, because Buff Bagwell did have some name value. He was a pretty big name in WCW.
Very much a WCW guy, yeah.
Right. Could they have had him, and then maybe they could have tried to present Mike Awesome just for the sake of this pay-per-view as a big guy or a main guy? Or
I mean, the fact that you're struggling just shows that this wasn't the right time to do this.
Wasn't the right time. I'm like thinking, who else could it have done?
You're racking your brains, like who, and like really scrape it, yeah.
Or unless maybe they should have just made this a 6-man tag, and just say it should have been maybe like, let's say Austin, Kurt Angle, and Jericho versus DDP, Booker T, and RVD would have seemed more even, I think, and more realistic.
Yeah, it's possible. Or they could have waited and then imagine Goldberg.
We'll get to that in a second, actually. But yeah, this match this is a long one. There's a lot going on here. It does seem like, again, WCW win in the end, so they win the whole show 5-6. But the story here is Stone Cold turning on, I guess, Kurt Angle. So it's really not got anything to do with WCW, and like Team WCW wins, but the end of the show is Stone Cold Steve Austin celebrating, drinking beer with like Stephanie and Shane, and then Paul Heyman. It's kind of like, this was WCW's big win. Stone Cold Steve Austin, like the ultimate WWF guy, drinking beer with the McMahons.
Yeah, that's a good point.
You know what I mean? Like,
it's about as WWF as you can get.
Right, exactly. So, and the match itself was fine, what you'd expect, like a good match, all good guys, all good wrestlers. But again, just the idea of what it should have been, I think, just took away from this match when I was watching it the whole entire time.
I think that's pretty spot on. I can't help but shake the feeling that Kane, first of all, he's one of my favorite wrestlers, is just the guy they get for main events when they can't get someone else. It just seems like a bit of a stand-in. I mean, I absolutely love him. I think he's incredible, but he just feels like that. The Survivor Series 2002 in the Elimination Chamber, I kind of felt like he was a bit of the odd one out as well.
Right.
I always feel like that, whereas Undertaker, he obviously doesn't feel like that. The match, like you said, was fine. I didn't really understand what made it a brawl, besides the fact there was just more tag members than normal.
It's just a term, yeah.
It's just a term. Despite the fact that the Dudleys were involved, for some reason I wasn't expecting any table shenanigans. for some reason, just because of the WWF people who are involved. So then getting 3 table spots out of nowhere in a quick succession towards the end was a nice little bonus for me, obviously, for someone like me who just loves table spots and nothing else. I just went
Loves
from
getting tabled.
from 0 tabled, to then 3 people got tabled in about 2 minutes. So I was in my element for that.
Must have been a good match.
Rhino. Oh yeah, there we go. That's enough to make it. Okay, 5 stars. Rhino. I'm glad that you speak kind of highly of Rhino. At least you seem to. I just think he's very underrated, and I really like Rhino. I've got to say that his legs. You know when people say, "Oh, their legs are like tree trunks." His legs are like actual tree trunks.
Here's the thing with Rhino. I felt like he had a good look, good intensity, and was pretty good in the ring. And the gore and stuff was over.
He has the best spear in the game, I say.
Yeah, I don't know if I'd agree. He definitely has a good one. I don't know if I'd say it was the best.
Who would you put over him?
Probably Goldberg.
Really?
Dude, that was way more over than the gore.
It was over because it was Goldberg.
Well, what else is there to base it on?
Just like the look of the thing. When Rhino does it, it looks like a friggin' linebacker's taking you out.
Oh, you should see Goldberg kill that. Goldberg kills people with it.
Oh, okay.
I feel like it's... Rhino kind of bounces off them. Goldberg just runs like through him. But anyway, I was going to say about Rhino. He had like those tools that I mentioned, but problem with Rhino is he could never really... He didn't have a lot of... he wasn't a great mic guy, great talker. So like that was always going to stop him from getting to the top of the card. He probably got as far in the card as he
could
have done, yeah.
Or realistically like deserved with his lack of mic presence. Yeah, I agree with that.
Yeah. And the Dudley Boys, it's kind of, again, it's funny how they're leaning on them here to kind of fill in for the alliance side. It's like, you know that they're just not doing this right if the Dudley Boys are having to fill 2 spaces on WCW. These guys have been in WWF for 2 or 3 years.
2 years.
It's also notable that like there's also a whole bunch of other guys that the WWF guys that aren't around at this point. Triple H is injured.
Yeah.
The Rock isn't back yet. The Rock he's off doing a movie. He will be back relatively soon, but he's off. Chris Benoit's not here. I think he was injured. Eddie Guerrero is not here. I think this is during... He might have been fired at this point. Maybe they brought it back a little bit later. He had a little time when he was off. Or he might have been injured here. I can't remember if he was injured or fired. Maybe he was fired. But either way, this, like, obviously, notably, Triple H and The Rock, sort of big names that they're missing here.
Marked
So
absences, yeah.
Again, so it's kind of like... It seemed like they kind of did this whole thing prematurely. But Sam, this match, there's not really much to say about this match, but what I wanted to do, I wrote down a fantasy invasion card. And this card is based on all these things being able to happen. So this is Vince buying out the contracts or whatever it might be. So this is
whatever it took to get your dream.
Right. This is not taking into account injuries or anything else. Obviously, the wrestlers had to be wrestlers at the time.
Present at the time, yeah.
Not dead or anything else. But this could have actually, at least in this year, could have happened if they made it happen.
Yeah.
This is my fantasy card. Do you want to hear it?
Okay.
Top to
I want to hear it. Yep.
Okay.
I'm going to do one after you.
Cool.
But let me write it down real quick now. I've got to... Actually, no, you do yours.
It's going to take you a while to write a whole card.
Because it will take me too long. Yeah.
Listen to mine and focus to mine first, because I worked on this.
Okay. Right.
So, Austin versus Goldberg. It's got to be, right? That's the number 1 match, really.
Main event.
Probably main event, yeah. But this one there's 3 other matches that could rival for main event.
Okay.
This is already much better than Invasion, through and through, just like 1 match. Austin versus Goldberg. That's better than this whole pay-per-view. Undertaker versus Sting. It's got to be the dream match for years and years and years. Both guys, franchises of their own companies. Whatever. People want to see that. 3rd match, which we did get about a year later, The Rock versus Hogan. It's got to be, right? Hollywood versus Hollywood. The
Hollywood
versus
versus
Hogan.
Yeah.
The 4th match, again, we should have got this at the time. And we actually haven't spoken about this guy this whole podcast, which is ridiculous. How they did this invasion angle and just didn't immediately try to get Eric Bischoff on board to run WCW rather than freaking Shane McMahon.
Shane McMahon.
But yeah, Vince McMahon versus Eric Bischoff. like has to be, right? You got to have that on the WCW versus WWE pay-per-view. By the way,
Completely agree.
I'm doing WCW versus WCW, not forget the ECW.
You don't think
crap.
ECW should have even really?
No,
yeah.
no, absolutely not.
That's fair.
Absolutely not.
Yeah. That Bischoff and McMahon one was almost like a legendary dream matchup. Anyway,
It is
based
a
on
dream-
Bischoff's
right.
wants himself.
Right,
So that
right.
would have just been everyone's dream come true.
Like Triple H versus Scott Hall, both Click members. They got history together. Both great wrestlers. This is where the card gets a little. Kevin Nash versus Kane. Of course,
Big guys.
two big guys. Kane was the fake Diesel for a long time, so like that's like a story within itself. They're both top guys. Like you have to have both those guys on the card. Why not put them in together? Ric Flair versus Kurt Angle. I mean, I think it kind of speaks for itself. Mr. WCW, Kurt Angle, great wrestler. Got the Hardy Boys versus Rey Mysterio and Billy Kidman. I think that would be a very exciting match at the time to see. You got like the resident high flyers from WCW versus the resident high flyers of WWF. Chris Jericho representing WWF versus DDP. Got the Steiner brothers. So Scott teaming up again with Rick Steiner against the Dudley Boys, two brother tag teams. Then we've got Booker T versus Eddie Guerrero. And then we've got Lita versus Medusa, who was Alundra Blaze back in the day in the WWF. But Medusa was blackballed from the WWE for many, many years because when she left WWF and joined WCW, she took the women's title with her from WWF, and on Nitro, she threw it in the trash. So there was no chance of them bringing her in, but they should have done because the girls could have actually had a proper match. Then I've also got some notable mentions.
Sorry, did you say Trish or Lita?
Lita versus Medusa.
Lita, yeah.
Then the notable mentions I got Lex, because there's more WCW guys that they could have actually wrestled that they just didn't have or didn't sign. I got Lex Luger and Buff Bagwell versus Edge and Christian. Chronic, who they brought in a few months during this invasion. Chronic versus the Dudley Boys. Oh, maybe I've got Dudley Boys twice. Well, that could be any tag team. And then I also put Bam Bam Bigelow versus Spike Dudley just because I liked Spike. And Bam Bam was in WCW towards the end. I guess just he didn't make the transfer over to the WWE.
Was Spike a WWF guy by that point?
Yeah. He joined in like 2001. Yeah. Sorry.
And I take it you just want Bam Bam to just throw his ass.
Well, they actually. I just wrote that down more for fun because Bam Bam, when they were in ECW together, Bam Bam and Spike actually had a series of matches. So I thought this should kind of be fun to have a match here.
Throwback, yeah.
Because yeah. But anyway, I was just trying to think of the WCW guys and everything else. But I mean, your main matches there, Austin Goldberg, Taker and Sting, Rock and Hogan, Vince and Bischoff, like those are your
Taker
big
and
matches.
Sting was like the biggest missed opportunity in my opinion.
I think Austin and Goldberg really.
Oh, I know, but like,
well, actually, no, it's a bigger miss Taker and Sting because they brought Sting in years later, and they had for a good year or two they had both Taker and Sting on the roster, even when they were doing these cinematic matches. Like, couldn't they? Like, if they were worried about the guys being past their primes, could they not at least had a cinematic match? Like, they like the perfect guys to have a cinematic match. Do you know what I mean? Like, completely perfect guys for it. The gimmicks, work for that. But,
suit that. Yep.
But yeah, that was my dream card. Let me know, guys, if you think that was better than Invasion.
Well, I mean, that's a no-brainer. But also, let us
course.
know what you think. Like the dream card would have been.
Yeah.
If Marty's wasn't good enough. I thought it was pretty good, by the way, man. But yeah, well, I'm interested in hearing what you guys think. I bet you can come up with some awesome ones.
I think there's some that I give, but then it's like, and I put Rock versus Hogan, but I was always so toying with ideas because I thought, well, we could do the Rock versus DDP, because like People's Champ versus People's Champ. Then I was thinking it'd be cool to do like Hall, Nash, and Hogan, the NWO versus like you reformed DX, because Shawn Michaels came back in 2002, man. So Triple H, Shawn, and like X-Pac or the Outlaws or whatever. So NWO versus DX was also a big dream match that people wanted to see for years. So there's Kurt Angle versus Rick Steiner, maybe. There's a whole host of different matches that they could have done. Just seems a shame that we didn't get to see any of them really in that way. I mean, we got Rock versus Hogan later, and we got Rock versus Goldberg later, and so yeah. But it's just a shame
that was too little, too late, though. Like
it was in terms of for this WCW versus WWF sort of whole deal. But
Yeah. Well,
Yeah, that's
there we
what
go.
That's what I wrote.
Pretty,
You know,
pretty
you-
good, man.
you haven't wrote down a card, have you?
No, it would have taken too long. It would have taken too long.
But yeah, that was the
But
WWF
instead we got-
Invasion pay-per-views, and
We got the
instead
final match.
we got what we got. We got
Mhm.
voluptuous breasts
Breasts,
and
yeah.
a Raven and Regal Ball Fest. So
Yeah, we
thank you,
did.
WWE. Would you consider
The-
this one of the biggest flops in wrestling history, Sam?
I've still found it entertaining.
Mm.
It was the biggest blue ball in wrestling.
Yes,
history, I
yeah,
would say.
biggest. That's a good way of
I
putting
wouldn't
it.
say it was the biggest flop because it was
Mm.
still an enjoyable card, right?
Well, that's what I'm trying to get at. Like,
I know, and it's
If you
so
put-
hard to do.
if you put everything aside, is it
it
actually
was
like?
okay. Yeah, it was okay.
If you watch the show with everything set aside, if you don't call this WWF WCW, you just call this is WWF
Mhm.
pay-per-view, this is Backlash or something. You just watch the show. I still found it more enjoyable than I found Heatwave last week.
Yeah, so I just want to say about the main event. Kurt Angle was getting the crowd, like the pops that he deserved. I felt like he was. Did you notice that the crowd?
Yeah, he was super over,
wild
yeah.
for him. Yeah, so
Mhm.
I just wanted to bring that because we're huge Kurt Angle guys. Yeah, but oh man, this is. Should we just do our match of the night, worst match of the night, and our
Yeah.
rating? Yeah. So obviously, there's no. It's pretty obvious what the match of the night was. It was a French kiss.
French
it was
kiss.
RVD.
Mwah.
Mhm. RVD versus Jeff Hardy, right? I can say that safely.
Yeah, for sure.
It was definitely mine for
It
sure.
was like it was arms and it was just so much above the rest of the card. Yeah,
Yep. What were you going to say? It was arms and legs above.
arms
the
and
rest.
legs.
It was
I'm coming-
It was arms and legs above the rest of the match. Rest of the card.
I'm coming up with new terms. Arms and legs.
French
better.
kiss. Yeah.
French kiss. Arms and
Oh, you
legs.
get all these down. These might be good merch one day.
The worst match
good
was
t-shirts.
probably Raven and Regal.
So, I mean, I've got the 6-man tag.
Oh,
my
maybe
least
that
favorite.
as well. I think Regal and Raven was worse because it was longer,
Fair
much
enough.
longer.
I feel like Raven and Regal's worse just by virtue of, again, for me personally, who was in it. Like I like them both, and it was just crushingly disappointing. However, that 6-man tag, I mean, I like Canyon. I don't even know who Hugh Morris is. It was just, I didn't. It was the one thing where I had nothing written down.
But it
It's
wasn't
like
a
Canyon
bad
and-
match. It was just a
I
nothing,
was just-
nothing match. You know,
It was a
Didn't do anything
nothing
wrong.
match, and but for me, nothing is worse than bad. Like look
I
at
think- but
that
I think-
episode of WCW Thunder. It was bad, but it was entertaining.
No, but I think boring is worse than nothing.
Yeah, I mean, I didn't find the Raven and Regal one like super boring. Oh, it was.
Oh,
pretty
I
boring.
did.
It was boring,
it
wasn't it?
was so boring. I was just like,
I don't
go
know.
home.
I just feel like I want to put. For me, it's the 6-man tag.
Okay.
It's just how I feel. Okay, stars. Do you want me to go first, or do you want to go first?
You can go first.
Okay, I'm going to give this a very generous 3 stars out of 5.
Oh, wow.
And I know
Jeez.
people. I know people are going to say, "How could you?" And I was toying between 2 and 3, and I was also toying between 2 and 3 last week with ECW Heatwave. And I know everyone's going to say, "Well, how, if you're toying between the 2, could you have given Heatwave the 2 and Invasion the 3?" And I've just talked myself into it. I'm actually. I've got to like the difference between those two for me and why I was thinking of giving this a 3, but was it did have a connecting thread throughout. We kept going back to McMahon, whether you liked or thought it was a better thing than what we got. We could have got better than Stephanie and Shane. We understand that, but with what we did have, at least there was a connecting thread throughout. It wasn't just a series of matches of varying quality, which
True.
ECW was. Like that was probably enough for me to make it more entertaining, and also that RVD and Jeff Hardy match was like it was really good, wasn't it? Let's just be honest. So, actually, I'm gonna stick with that. I'm gonna say 3 out of 5. What about you, Marty? Let's hear it.
I'm gonna sit right in the middle and give this a 2.5 out of 5 rating. There was you got to do 0.5, so you definitely got to do that with a star rating. It's too narrow with just 1, 2, 3.
Then it's
4,
out
5.
of 10.
Yeah, that's what 5 stars is. That's what a star rating is. I know you don't agree with it, but that is a real thing. You don't agree with it actually doing quarter stars and 3/4 is a thing as well. But I
Oh,
would
I've seen
say,
that. Yeah.
dude, like you go on Google reviews or Yelp or anything else, you don't just want something to be a 2 or 3. It's 2.5 or whatever. So yeah, 2.5 right down the middle. The Van Dam and Jeff Hardy match I really, really enjoyed. I thought that was awesome. I enjoyed the opener with Edge and Christian against Awesome and Lance Storm. I also thought the main event the crowd was super duper into. The crowd was hot. The crowd was pretty hot for the majority of the night. At the same time, there was some parts of the show that kind of lackluster, like that brought it down considerably. Of course, that Raven and Regal match, the 6-man tag team with the Heat guys.
Didn't help that they're all in a row as well.
Right, the Brian Panties match I could do without. But and then the referees match was kind of like relatively entertaining. So yeah, the whole thing for me kind of right down the middle. So I would say that I enjoyed it more than Heatwave last week, but I also don't think I enjoy. I don't think I can give this pay per view 3 stars, and I'm giving it 2.5 stars. Again, that's not bearing in mind what it should have been. If I'm looking at it from that perspective, it gets 0 stars.
It's a 0.
It's a 0. But if you just look at it standalone, as from bell to bell, just a wrestling show, 2.5 stars from me.
I think that's really fair. I would give it a 2.5 if I wasn't being stubborn about stars. Because again, to me, it's like 3 seems too much, 2 seems too little. I'm like, if only there was a system that but they haven't come up with one. But it's so 2.5. I think that's fair.
Okay.
But like when you say 2.5, even though that is literally down the middle, like 50%, it does seem unfair to the RVD and Jeff Hardy match. But then you've got to understand that like the rest, like a lot of it was so bad. Like it was a lot of it was so boring that.
I mean, if it didn't have the Van Dam and Jeff, it'd be like a 1
star. Yeah.
Right. I mean, there's like what? How many matches on this show? 10 matches?
11, 10.
Like they're just like a tenth of this show. So like they can't bring it up all that high in the star ratings, can they? Do you know what I mean? That we're already giving them like an extra star because of that, and they're only a tenth of the show.
No, you're absolutely right. And also, like a lot of the other stuff that happened in this that entertained me weren't actually real matches. Like the referee thing was entertaining, but it was not a real match. So come on. And the Brian Paddy's thing was kind of entertaining, not a real match. The backstage shenanigans, not a great storyline, still not a real match. And so actually, I think we're pretty fair on this one.
I think right down there. I think it's almost generous to give it 2.5, but I'm gonna give it mainly because if the crowd weren't so hot, I think it would have brought it down a star rating or
imagine that.
But the crowd's into it, so I can't really crap on it too much. That's why I say it's right in the middle.
Imagine if it didn't have that atmosphere of the crowd being just on. That would have been miserable watch, wouldn't it?
It makes a big difference.
Ohio seems to be the place to go if you want a decent crowd, right? They cheer for anything.
Seem hot for it. They seem
guys from Ohio. You seem to cheer for anything. Heatwave and Invasion.
There we go. I want to hear. We want to hear what you guys thought of this show. I feel like we're gonna. I can already kind of predict people's opinions of the show, how people look back on the show. But again, I watched this when it happened. I watched it again all these years later. I wanted to see, was it as bad as people made out? And I wouldn't say it's as bad as people make out, to be fair. As bad because people make out this is like the worst thing of all time. And I don't think it was terrible TV. It's just, again, the way you put it, blue balls, what could have been. And I guess we should probably leave it at that. What could have been.
I've never seen such like of a possibility of opportunity and just something undeliver so spectacularly ever. Not even in wrestling, like ever.
Well, you'd be happy
as
to
a
know.
So
you'd be happy to know that they do this whole thing about a year later when they bring the NWO into the WWF. But go on, carry on.
Yeah. I was just gonna say that I can't just seriously unbelievably underwhelming compared to what could have been. Standalone, taking all that aside, middle of the road does kind of seem generous, but
we've said it, middle of the road.
There was
2.
some great stuff. Yeah, there was also a great match, and the crowd were hot. Yeah, 2.5.
So Let us know what you think of the show at The Villain Pod on Instagram, at The Villain Pod on TikTok. You don't stop. Follow us on YouTube. Our TikTok is kind of kicking off. People seem to be loving the TikTok, so make sure you're on there. Before this podcast, Sam and I didn't even know what a TikTok was, and now we are down with the Gen Zs, and we like the TikTok now. So
TikTok was a Kesha song in my day.
it was in my day as well, but apparently now it's something more. So follow us on there, and this was a fun one to go back and review the Invasion angle. And I'm sure a lot of you are going to enjoy this, and we're going to have lots of talk and debate on the Instagram account. Sam, have you got anything to plug?
I've got nothing to plug, but I also just want to say, again, we want to hear how you would have handled this card if it was up to you. I'm feeling some Brothers of Destruction versus Sting and maybe Kevin Nash.
I'm trying to send us home here, Sam, and now you're going back into discussion about it.
All right, well, I can't. Well.
I'm waiting for you to give us the go home live.
All right, well, I think now is time. So have a good week. Till next week.
Bye-bye.